The most famous betrayal in history wasn't committed by a warrior, a king, or even a man. It was carried out by a woman whose name has become synonymous with seduction treachery for over 3,000 years. Delilah didn't just defeat Samson, she obliterated him so completely that his story became a warning whispered through generations. But here's what most people don't know. There are shocking details about Delilah's true motives and methods that will completely change how you see this ancient tale of love, lies, and ultimate destruction. But before you settle in, if you're new to this channel, consider hitting that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Your support means we can continue producing more content to help you unwind or learn something new. Also, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is. We're building a global community here, so you can meet and connect with like-minded folks from around the world. So without further ado, let's get started with today's story, shall we? Darkness wraps around the room like a shroud. Only moonlight cuts through the window, casting silver across the sleeping giant's face. Samson breathes deep and steady. His chest rises and falls with the rhythm of complete trust. Delilah sits beside him, her fingers trembling as they hover over the bronze shears. The metal catches the light, cold and sharp. Her eyes dart to the window, then back to his face. Peaceful, unaware, vulnerable. Somewhere in the shadows, Philistine soldiers wait. Their armor barely clinks as they shift positions. 5 lords have paid her well for this moment. 1,100 pieces of silver from each, more wealth than most see in a lifetime. She reaches for a lock of his hair, dark, thick, never touched by a blade, the source of his impossible strength. The secret he finally surrendered after months of her gentle probing. Her fingers wrap around the strands and she lifts the shears, one cut, then another. Hair falls silently to the floor like autumn leaves. Each snip draws away years of divine protection. The covenant between heaven and earth dissolves with every strand. His breathing changes. Lighter now. Ordinary. The supernatural power that once let him tear lions apart with bare hands seeps away into the night. She whispers his name, testing. He stirs, but doesn't wake. The Philistines creep closer. Their leader nods to Delilah. She calls out, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He jolts awake, muscles tensing for the fight. But when he pushes against his bonds, nothing happens. The ropes hold. His strength is gone. Confusion floods his face as reality settles in. The woman he loved has sold him for silver. The giant has fallen. The legend ends not with a roar, but with a whisper of betrayal. Darkness swallows the scene. Only echoes remain. The world of Judges, a land without kings. Picture a land caught between chaos and hope. Ancient Israel sprawls across hills and valleys, 12 tribes scattered like seeds on rocky ground. No crown sits on any head. No throne commands from a palace. Just emptiness where leadership should be. The people wander through their days like sheep without a shepherd. When trouble comes, they cry out to heaven. When peace returns, they forget their prayers. This cycle spins endlessly, generation after generation. Raiders sweep down from the mountains whenever they please. Midianites, Moabites, Ammonites. Enemies circle like vultures. They steal crops, burn villages, take slaves. The Israelites hide in caves and strongholds, waiting for the storms to pass. But sometimes heaven sends help. A judge rises from the people, not a king with armies, but an ordinary person touched by divine power. Deborah the prophetess, Gideon the farmer, Jephthah the outcast. Each one different, but all called to deliver their people from oppression. These judges never rule long. They appear when needed, strike their enemies, then fade back into legend. The people celebrate, then slowly drift away from the laws that bind them to their God. Soon enough, new enemies appear. The cycle begins again. Towns stay small and scattered. Trade routes become dangerous. Learning fades as survival takes priority. The great promises made to Abraham and Moses seem like distant dreams. Young men grow up hearing stories of past miracles, the parting of the sea, the walls of Jericho. But those tales feel like fairy stories now. Their present reality is simpler and harsher. Work the land, protect your family, hope for better days. The priests still offer sacrifices, but the Ark of the Covenant sits in obscurity. The sacred tent moves from place to place, following the tribes in their wanderings. Even the Levites struggle to maintain their duties when war disrupts everything. In this broken world, people make compromises. They marry into neighboring tribes despite the warnings. They adopt foreign customs, worship strange gods. The boundaries between Israel and its enemies blur. Yet, hope persists. Mothers still tell their children about the covenant. Fathers still circumcise their sons. The faithful still gather for feasts and festivals. The promise remains alive, even in the darkness. This is the world that shapes Samson's story, a place where miracles feel necessary because human strength isn't enough, where a single person touched by heaven can change everything, where the line between hero and tragedy runs thin as a hair. The stage is set for something extraordinary. The people need a deliverer. Their enemies grow stronger each day. And in the hills of Dan, a woman waits for a miracle that will shake the earth. Enter the Philistines, lords of the sea people. They came from across the Mediterranean, sailing in ships with curved prows and painted sails, warriors from distant islands driven by hunger for new lands. History would call them the Sea Peoples, but to the Israelites, they were simply the Philistines. Their arrival changed everything. Unlike the nomadic raiders who struck and fled, these newcomers came to stay. They built cities along the coast, each one a fortress of stone and ambition. Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Ekron, Gath, 5 strongholds that would cast shadows across the land for centuries. The Philistines brought more than swords and shields. They carried the secrets of iron. While the Israelites still fought with bronze weapons, their enemies forged superior blades in hidden workshops. The sound of hammering metal echoed from their cities day and night. Each city served a lord, but the 5 lords worked together like fingers on a hand. They shared resources, coordinated attacks, and divided conquered territories. This unity made them nearly unstoppable against the scattered tribes of Israel. Their god Dagon ruled from temples of carved stone. Half man, half fish, he promised dominion over both land and sea. Priests offered sacrifices while the people celebrated victories. Religion and warfare blended into one driving force. The Philistine soldiers were professionals. They trained constantly, maintained their equipment, and followed strict discipline. Their chariots thundered across battlefields. Their archers shot with deadly precision. Their infantry advanced in perfect formation. But they offered more than just conquest. Philistine merchants brought exotic goods from distant lands. Their craftsmen created beautiful pottery and jewelry. Their farmers introduced new crops and techniques. Some Israelites began to see them as neighbors rather than enemies. This cultural mixing troubled the faithful. Intermarriage became common. Young Israelites learned Philistine customs, spoke their language, adopted their fashions. The distinct identity of God's chosen people began to blur. The Philistines established trade routes that connected the Mediterranean to the desert. Caravans carried goods between Egypt and Mesopotamia, passing through Philistine territory. Taxes from this trade filled their treasuries and funded their armies. They built no temporary camps. Every Philistine settlement was planned for permanence. Stone houses, paved streets, drainage systems, marketplaces, these were the foundations of a new order. They intended to rule this land forever. Their expansion pushed inland gradually but relentlessly. Village by village, valley by valley, they extended their control. They demanded tribute from those they couldn't conquer, creating a network of dependent communities. The Israelite response was fragmented and desperate. Individual tribes fought alone, usually losing. The Philistines seemed unstoppable, their iron weapons cutting through bronze like paper. Fear settled over the land like morning mist. Yet something in the Philistines' success bred overconfidence. They began to believe their own propaganda. Their God seemed stronger than the God of Israel. Their civilization appeared superior to the scattered tribes. Their victory felt inevitable. This arrogance would prove costly. The God of Israel had not abandoned his people. He was preparing a response that would shake the Philistine lords to their foundations. A child was coming who would make them fear the dark. Birth of a Nazarite, the child with no razor. In the hill country of Dan, a woman named Manoah's wife lived with quiet desperation. Years of marriage had passed without children. In her culture, this meant more than personal sadness. It suggested divine displeasure, a mark of shame that followed her through every day. She carried water from the well while other women discussed their sons. She prepared meals for 2 while neighbors fed growing families. She wove cloth while listening to lullabies drifting through windows. The emptiness grew heavier with each passing season. Manoah loved her completely, but even his kindness couldn't fill the void. Friends offered advice, remedies, prayers. Nothing worked. The womb remained closed, the house remained quiet, the future remained uncertain. Then one afternoon, while she worked alone in the field, a stranger appeared. Not walking up the path like normal visitors, but simply there, as if the earth itself had shaped him from sunlight and shadow. His presence made the air shimmer with possibility. "You are barren and childless," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute truth. "But you will conceive and give birth to a son." The words hit her like lightning. She dropped her work, staring at this mysterious figure. His appearance was ordinary yet extraordinary, human yet otherworldly. When she tried to focus on his face, it seemed to shift like flame. "You must not drink wine or strong drink," he continued. "Eat nothing unclean. The child you carry will be a Nazirite from birth. No razor shall touch his head, for he will begin to deliver Israel from the Philistines." Before she could respond, he vanished. Not walking away or fading slowly, but gone like a snuffed candle. She stood alone in the field, wondering if she had dreamed the encounter. She ran home to tell Manoah, words tumbling over each other in excitement. Her husband listened with growing amazement, then fell to his knees in prayer. If this was true, if God truly planned to bless them, they needed to understand their responsibilities. The stranger returned when Manoah begged for more instruction. This time, both husband and wife witnessed the miracle. The visitor repeated his commands, then demonstrated his true nature. When they offered a sacrifice, he ascended to heaven in the flames. Manoah realized they had encountered an angel. Fear seized him, but his wife showed more wisdom. If God intended to kill them, she reasoned, he wouldn't have promised them a son. The visit meant blessing, not judgment. Months passed. Her body changed as new life grew within. Neighbors whispered about the impossible pregnancy, but she and Manoah kept the angel's words private. This child would be special, set apart from birth for a divine purpose. She followed every instruction carefully. No wine touched her lips. She avoided unclean foods. She prepared herself to raise a Nazirite, understanding that his hair would never be cut, his diet would be restricted, his life would be consecrated to God. The birth came with typical pain but supernatural hope. A son, just as promised. They named him Samson, meaning little sun. He would grow to shine like a blazing star, bringing light to his people's darkness. From his first breath, the child was different. Stronger than normal babies, more alert, more active. The Spirit of God moved upon him even in infancy. Neighbors who visited sensed something extraordinary about the boy. Manoah and his wife raised him carefully, teaching him the laws of his Nazirite vow. No razor for his hair, no wine for his throat, no contact with dead bodies. These restrictions marked him as holy, separated for God's purposes. The boy grew rapidly, his strength increasing beyond normal bounds. By adolescence, he could lift stones that challenged grown men. Wild animals fled from his presence. The Philistines who ruled the area began to notice the strange young man from Dan. Young Samson, strength without wisdom. Samson's teenage years exploded with power and passion. His body grew tall and broad, muscles rippling beneath sun-darkened skin. His hair flowed down his back like a mane, never touched by blade or flame. But while his strength reached supernatural heights, his wisdom remained achingly ordinary. The first signs appeared during childhood games. Wrestling matches ended too quickly. Foot races became lonely victories. Other boys learned to avoid competitions they couldn't win. Samson found himself increasingly isolated, his gifts becoming barriers rather than bridges. His parents watched with growing concern. They had raised him carefully, teaching him the laws and customs of his people. But teenage rebellion ran deeper than parental guidance. Samson began to test boundaries, to push against the restrictions that governed his life. One summer day, while helping his father in the fields, Samson grew frustrated with a stubborn ox. The animal refused to move despite prodding and pulling. In a moment of anger, the young man grabbed the beast and lifted it clean off the ground. The ox's eyes bulged with terror before Samson set it down gently. Word of such incidents spread through the villages. Some whispered about divine blessing. Others muttered about demonic possession. Parents warned their children to stay away from the strange boy from Dan. Samson felt the weight of their stares wherever he went. His social awkwardness grew worse as his reputation spread. Conversations died when he approached. Invitations stopped coming. Girls giggled nervously when he tried to talk to them. The very strength that should have made him a leader, instead, made him an outcast. Loneliness bred anger, and anger bred recklessness. Samson began picking fights with Philistine soldiers who patrolled the region. These encounters never lasted long. A casual backhand would send armed warriors flying. Soon, entire patrols learned to avoid the roads near his village. His parents pleaded with him to control his temper. The Philistines ruled this land, they reminded him. Drawing their attention would bring trouble to everyone. But Samson felt invincible, untouchable. What could mere mortals do to someone blessed by God? The pranks started small, blocking roads with boulders, tearing down military tents, releasing prisoners from Philistine jails. Each incident escalated his reputation and their anger. The local lords began offering rewards for information about the mysterious saboteur. Samson discovered he enjoyed the attention even when it was negative. Better to be feared than ignored. His stunts grew bolder, his targets more significant. He began to see himself as a one-man resistance movement, a divine instrument of justice. But justice mixed with vengeance creates a dangerous brew. Samson's actions often hurt innocent people along with his intended targets. Merchants lost goods when he disrupted caravans. Farmers suffered when he destroyed Philistine installations near their fields. His parents aged rapidly during this period. The stress of raising such a volatile child took its toll. They prayed constantly for wisdom, for protection, for their son to find his true purpose. But Samson seemed determined to waste his gifts on petty conflicts. The young man's heart yearned for something he couldn't name. Love, perhaps. Acceptance. Purpose beyond mere destruction. He looked at other young men his age, settling into normal lives with wives and children and honest work. Sometimes he envied their simplicity, but simplicity was denied to him. His strength set him apart, his calling isolated him, his destiny loomed like a storm cloud on the horizon. He was trapped between his human desires and his divine purpose, understanding neither fully. The Philistines began to take him seriously. This wasn't just teenage rebellion anymore. Samson was becoming a genuine threat to their authority. Plans were made, strategies discussed, traps prepared. The game was about to change. The lion and the honey, blood and sweetness. The road to Timnah wound through rocky hills where wild things lived. Samson walked alone, his mind churning with thoughts of the Philistine girl who had caught his eye. She was beautiful, exotic, forbidden. Everything his parents warned him against, everything he wanted. The attack came without warning. A young lion burst from the underbrush, muscles coiled like springs, teeth bared in a snarl of pure hunger. Most men would have run screaming. Samson stood his ground, curiosity mixing with excitement. The beast launched itself through the air, claws extended, roaring its challenge. Time seemed to slow as Samson watched death approach. Then instinct took over. His hands shot out, grasping the lion's jaw. The Spirit of God rushed upon him like a mighty wind. The struggle lasted only moments. Samson's fingers found their grip, and he pulled. The lion's roar became a gurgle, then silence. Bones snapped like dry wood. The great cat went limp in his hands, its life extinguished as easily as snuffing a candle. He set the carcass down gently, almost reverently. The creature had been magnificent in life, deserving respect in death. But Samson felt no pride in the killing, only a strange emptiness. His strength had acted without conscious thought, leaving him feeling more like a tool than a man. He continued to Timnah without looking back. The dead lion meant nothing to him beyond proof of his power. He had other concerns, other desires to pursue. The Philistine girl awaited, and his heart raced with anticipation. Days passed. Samson's courtship progressed, despite his parents' objections. They argued about mixing with pagans, about violating the law, about the danger of Philistine alliances. He ignored their warnings, driven by emotions stronger than wisdom. The return journey took him past the same spot where the lion had died. Curiosity made him leave the path to examine the carcass. What he found defied explanation. The ribcage had become a hive, golden honey dripping from the bones like liquid sunlight. Bees buzzed lazily around their unlikely home, having transformed death into sweetness. The sight struck Samson as profound, though he couldn't explain why. Life emerging from death, beauty growing from violence, hope blooming in the most unlikely places. He scooped honey with his hands, tasting the impossible sweetness. The flavor exploded across his tongue, pure and clean and perfect. He gathered more, filling his palms with the golden treasure. This was worth sharing. His parents received the honey gratefully, praising its unusual flavor. They asked where he had found such a rare delicacy. Samson smiled but said nothing. Some secrets were meant to be kept, some experiences too strange for ordinary words. The image haunted his dreams, the fierce lion transformed into a source of nourishment, strength becoming sweetness, death giving birth to life. The paradox felt like a message, though he couldn't decode its meaning. Perhaps it spoke of his own nature, violence and gentleness warring within him, the capacity to destroy and create existing side by side, his calling as both judge and protector, warrior and deliverer. Or maybe it pointed to his future, victories that would taste bitter, defeats that would yield unexpected blessings, the complex tapestry of a life lived between divine purpose and human frailty. The honey became the inspiration for his wedding riddle. Guests would puzzle over the words, never guessing their origin. The lion and the honey would become symbols of his story, twin mysteries that defined his journey. From the eater came something to eat. From the strong came something sweet. Life and death, power and vulnerability, all mixed together like honey and blood. The riddle of Samson's existence, written in the stars and sealed with divine promise. The bees continued their work, unconcerned with human symbolism. They had found a home in the bones of the dead, creating sweetness from decay. Nature's alchemy, transforming everything into something new. The first wedding, love, trickery, and a body count. The wedding feast stretched across 7 days, as custom demanded. Samson's bride glowed with beauty and nervous excitement. Her family had prepared lavishly, hoping to impress their dangerous new son-in-law. 30 young Philistine men served as companions, watching the Hebrew giant with wary fascination. Wine flowed freely, but Samson's lips remained untouched. His Nazirite vow forbade the grape's fermented gift. He nursed cups of water while others grew merry, feeling increasingly isolated from the celebration meant to honor him. His bride sat beside him, radiant in her wedding garments. Her eyes sparkled with joy and something else. Fear, perhaps, or calculation. She was beautiful beyond measure, but beauty often concealed depths he couldn't fathom. The third day brought restlessness. Samson craved entertainment, something to break the monotony of polite conversation and ceremonial meals. His mind turned to the riddle that had been brewing since his encounter with the lion and the honey. "Let me pose a riddle," he announced to the gathering. The Philistine companions perked up with interest. Riddles were serious business in their culture, tests of wit and wisdom that could determine status and respect. "If you can solve it within the 7 days," Samson continued, "I'll give you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes. If you can't solve it, you give me the same." The companions exchanged glances. 30 garments represented significant wealth, but they were confident in their collective intelligence. Besides, what riddle could stump 30 educated men working together? Samson's voice carried across the feast hall, rich with challenge and mystery. Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. What is it? Silence fell like a stone into still water. The companions frowned, their minds racing through possibilities. Eater and eaten, strong and sweet. The combinations seemed endless, but none felt right. Days passed without progress. The Philistines grew increasingly frustrated, their confidence cracking like dried clay. They huddled in corners, whispering theories and discarding them just as quickly. The riddle consumed their thoughts, haunting their dreams. By the 4th day, desperation had set in. The companions approached Samson's bride with expressions of barely controlled anger. Their honor was at stake, their wealth threatened. They needed help, and she was their only hope. "Coax your husband to explain the riddle," they urged. "If you don't, we'll burn you in your father's house. Did you invite us here to rob us?" The threat was clear and deadly. She had no choice but to comply. That evening, she approached Samson with tears streaming down her face. Her beauty became a weapon, her vulnerability a tool of manipulation. "You hate me," she sobbed. "You don't really love me. You've given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer." Samson's heart twisted at her distress. "I haven't even told my father or mother," he protested. "Why should I tell you?" But she persisted, weeping and pleading throughout the remaining days. Her tears wore down his resistance like water eroding stone. Love and guilt battled with prudence and pride. Finally, on the seventh day, he surrendered. The secret spilled out like water from a broken jar: the lion, the honey, the bees, the bones. She listened with growing understanding, her tears drying as knowledge filled the void. Before sunset, she had shared everything with her companions. At the feast's end, the 30 men approached with smug satisfaction. What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? Samson's face darkened with realization. The betrayal cut deeper than any sword. His new wife had sold his secret for her own safety, choosing her people over her husband. The marriage was already broken, poisoned by deception and fear. If you hadn't plowed with my heifer, he growled, you wouldn't have solved my riddle. The Spirit of God came upon him like a tempest. Rage and power merged into something terrible and beautiful. He left the feast without a word, his bride's tears following him into the night. 30 men would die to pay his debt. 30 families would mourn because of a riddle and its betrayal. The wedding feast had become a funeral. Love had become vengeance, and sweetness had turned to bitter blood. The honey and the lion had taught their lesson. From strength came sweetness, but from betrayal came only death. Philistine retaliation. Escalation begins. The news of the 30 murders spread like wildfire through Philistine territory. 30 young men, cut down in their prime by a Hebrew madman's rage. 30 families wailing in the streets, demanding justice. 30 graves dug in the rocky soil of Ashkelon. Samson had descended on the coastal city like a natural disaster. He struck without warning, taking lives and possessions with equal efficiency. The 30 sets of clothing he'd promised were stripped from cooling corpses. Payment for a riddle solved through treachery. The bride's family panicked when they heard the news. Their daughter's husband had become a killer, a force of nature beyond control or reason. They made the only choice that seemed safe. They gave her to one of the wedding companions, dissolving the marriage that had already turned to poison. But Samson didn't know about this betrayal yet. After his bloody work in Ashkelon, he'd retreated to his parents' home in the hills of Dan. Time passed while his anger cooled and his conscience struggled with what he'd done. 30 men dead because of a riddle and wounded pride. The grief was real, but so was the justification. They had cheated, used his wife against him, treated his hospitality with contempt. The debt had to be paid, the balance restored. Still, the faces of the dead haunted his dreams. Weeks later, during the wheat harvest, Samson's heart softened toward his wife. Love, or what he thought was love, called him back to Timnah. He brought a young goat as a peace offering, hoping to bridge the gap his violence had created. Let me go to my wife in her room, he told her father when he arrived. The old man's face went pale. I thought you hated her completely, he stammered. I gave her to your companion, but her younger sister is more beautiful. Take her instead. The words hit Samson like a physical blow. His wife, the woman he'd killed for, had been given to another man. The betrayal was complete, the humiliation absolute. His gifts had been rejected, his marriage dissolved, his love treated like refuse. Rage exploded through him like molten metal. But this time, he channeled it differently. No more random violence, no more personal vendettas. If the Philistines wanted war, he would give them war on a scale they couldn't imagine. He caught 300 foxes, a feat that would have seemed impossible to ordinary men. Each animal was trapped, tamed just enough to be handled. Then came the diabolical inspiration. He tied them in pairs, tail to tail, with torches fastened between them. The timing was perfect. Harvest season meant fields full of ripe grain, olive groves heavy with fruit, vineyards ready for picking. The Philistines' wealth lay exposed, waiting for the torch. Samson lit the brands and released his living weapons into the night. The foxes ran in terror, setting fire to everything they touched. Grain fields exploded into walls of flame. Olive trees became torches. Vineyards crackled and died. The sky glowed orange with destruction as months of labor turned to ash. The damage was catastrophic. Entire harvests vanished in a single night. Farmers who had worked all year found themselves facing starvation. The economic blow struck every level of Philistine society. When dawn broke, the scope of the disaster became clear. Thousands of acres lay blackened and ruined. The air reeked of smoke and failure, and everyone knew who was responsible. The Hebrew with the impossible strength had struck again. The Philistine lords gathered in emergency council. This wasn't just personal revenge anymore. Samson had declared war on their entire civilization. The time for tolerance had passed. They found the bride's family cowering in their house, terrified of both sides. The Philistines' justice was swift and brutal. They burned her and her father alive, their screams echoing through the town as flames consumed the house. The message was clear. Betrayal would be punished. Weakness would not be tolerated. But they had miscalculated Samson's response. The woman's death, however it had happened, was still connected to his story. More blood had been spilled because of his actions. The cycle of violence had begun in earnest. Samson's personal grievances had escalated into tribal warfare. The Philistines had lost their harvest and their patience. The Israelites would soon be caught in the crossfire. War was coming to the land of judges, and its harbinger was a man whose strength came from God, but whose wisdom came from his own wounded heart. The jawbone of a donkey. One-man army. The Philistine army moved like a plague across the landscape. 3,000 soldiers, their bronze armor glinting in the harsh sunlight, their spears bristling like a forest of death. They came seeking one man, but their presence threatened an entire tribe. The men of Judah watched from their hilltops as the enemy force made camp in their territory. Fear settled over the villages like morning mist. Mothers hid their children. Fathers sharpened their farming tools. Everyone knew why the Philistines had come. "We've come for Samson," the Philistine commanders announced. "Hand him over, and we'll leave peacefully. Refuse, and we'll take him by force." The elders of Judah gathered in desperate council. 3,000 against their scattered militia meant massacre. Their best warriors couldn't stand against professional soldiers with superior weapons. They had only one choice. A delegation of 3,000 Judahites climbed the rocky stronghold of Etam where Samson had taken refuge. They found him alone, sitting on a ledge overlooking the valley, watching the enemy camp with unreadable eyes. "Don't you realize the Philistines rule over us?" their spokesman demanded. "What have you done to us?" Samson's voice carried no apology, no regret. "I merely did to them what they did to me." The logic was simple but devastating. Personal justice had become tribal catastrophe. The elders pressed their case with growing urgency. They couldn't protect him, couldn't fight for him, couldn't let their people die for his vengeance. "We've come to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines," they said. Samson studied their faces, seeing fear mixed with determination. These were his own people, his brothers in blood and faith. He wouldn't force them to choose between loyalty and survival. "Swear to me that you won't kill me yourselves," he said finally. They swore the oath gladly. This wasn't about execution, just surrender. They bound him with 2 new ropes, thick and strong, then began the long march down to the valley. Samson walked peacefully among them, his strength hidden beneath the bonds. The Philistines cheered when they saw their prize approaching. The giant who had terrorized their cities was finally in chains. His hair still flowed freely, marking him as one of those strange Hebrew holy men, but ropes negated whatever magic his god might provide. As the party reached the valley floor, something changed in Samson's demeanor. The Spirit of God rushed upon him like a mighty wind. The ropes around his arms became like burned flax, falling away like ash. His bonds snapped and dissolved. The Philistines' cheers turned to shouts of alarm. Some reached for their weapons, others tried to flee. But 3,000 soldiers pressed together made movement difficult. They had become their own trap. Samson's eyes fell on a fresh jawbone lying nearby, still moist from its recent separation from a donkey's skull. He picked up the crude weapon, testing its weight and balance. It would serve. What happened next would be remembered for generations. One man with a piece of bone became an army of destruction. The jawbones swung in deadly arcs, crushing skulls, breaking necks, shattering bones. Philistine soldiers fell like wheat before a scythe. The professional warriors had trained for organized combat, shield walls, coordinated attacks. They were helpless against this whirlwind of violence. Their bronze armor meant nothing against the impossible strength behind each blow. Some tried to form defensive lines, but Samson moved too quickly. He struck from unexpected angles, leaping over shields, ducking under spears. The jawbone became an extension of his will, dealing death with surgical precision. Others attempted to flee, but the press of bodies trapped them. Panic spread through the ranks like disease. Men trampled their own comrades in desperation to escape. The organized army dissolved into a mob of terrified individuals. The slaughter continued until the sun began to set. Bodies lay heaped like cordwood across the valley floor. The jawbone, worn smooth by constant use, finally cracked and splintered. Samson let the pieces fall from his hands. He looked across the field of death, counting the corpses in neat rows. 1,000 and Philistines would never return home. 1,000 families would mourn. 1,000 graves would mark his victory. Exhaustion and thirst overwhelmed him. The divine strength that had carried him through battle left him weak and empty. He cried out to God, pleading for water, fearing he might die of thirst after surviving the battle. God split a hollow place in the rock, and water gushed forth. Samson drank deeply, his strength returning with each swallow. The place was named On HaKorah, the spring of the caller, marking the spot where heaven answered desperation. The men of Judah who had bound him stood speechless among the carnage. Their prisoner had become their deliverer, their shame had become their salvation. The Philistines retreated, leaving their dead to feed the vultures. Word of the victory spread like wildfire through the tribes of Israel. Samson the judge had been born in battle, his authority written in enemy blood. The time of hiding was over. Delilah's world, woman in the shadows. The valley of Sorek stretched between the hills like a green ribbon, its streams feeding orchards and vineyards that had known peace for decades. Here, far from the chaos of tribal warfare, a different kind of life flourished. Merchants, artisans, and farmers worked side by side, regardless of their ancestry. Delilah moved through this world like a shadow made flesh, beautiful beyond measure, but carefully invisible when she chose to be. Her origins remained mysteriously vague, her loyalties deliberately unclear. Some whispered she was Hebrew, others claimed Philistine blood. The truth mattered less than her usefulness. Her house sat on the border between territories, a perfect position for someone who dealt in information. Travelers stopped to rest, merchants paused to trade, soldiers sought entertainment. Each visitor brought news, rumors, secrets that could be bought or sold to the highest bidder. She had learned survival in a harsh school. The weak died young in the borderlands, the naive were devoured by those who understood power. Delilah had chosen to be neither. She cultivated strength through intelligence, protection through indispensability. The Philistine lords knew her value. She could move freely among the Hebrew settlements, her beauty opening doors that remained closed to their spies. Her house became a listening post, her bed a confessional for men who spoke too freely in passion's aftermath. But Delilah was no simple prostitute, despite what history would later claim. She was a businesswoman in the most dangerous trade imaginable. Information was her currency, secrets her stock in trade. She dealt with all sides because neutrality meant survival. Her servants were carefully chosen for loyalty and discretion. They moved through markets and taverns, gathering whispers and rumors. A network of eyes and ears extended from her modest house, reaching into every corner of the borderlands. The Hebrew judge named Samson was well known to her, though they had never met. His exploits provided endless conversation among her guests. Some called him a monster, others a hero. All agreed he was dangerous beyond measure. She had watched from a distance as his legend grew. The lion torn apart with bare hands, the wedding that ended in massacre, the foxes that burned the harvest, the jawbone that slaughtered an army. Each story seemed more impossible than the last. But Delilah understood something others missed. Samson was a man, not a myth. He had desires, weaknesses, needs that his strength couldn't fulfill. The right woman, approaching at the right moment, might find cracks in his armor. This knowledge remained theoretical until the Philistine lords came calling. 5 rulers arriving together meant serious business. They spoke in hushed tones about their enemy, about failed attempts to capture him, about the need for a different approach. "We've tried force," Lord Saren admitted. "We've tried ambush, poison, trickery, nothing works. His strength comes from his God, and we can't fight heaven with swords." The others nodded grimly. Samson had become more than a military problem. He was a symbol of Hebrew resistance, proof that their gods still fought for them. His very existence challenged Philistine authority. "But every man has weaknesses," another lord continued. "Pride, anger, lust. Find the right pressure point, and even giants fall. They looked at Delilah with calculating eyes. She was their last hope, their final gambit. If she could discover the source of Samson's strength, they could finally destroy him. The price they offered reflected their desperation. 1,100 pieces of silver from each lord, 5,500 pieces total. More wealth than most people saw in 10 lifetimes, enough to buy land, servants, security, enough to change everything. Delilah listened without commitment. The task was dangerous beyond measure. If Samson discovered her treachery, her death would be swift and certain. If she succeeded, the Philistines might eliminate her to protect their secret. Either path led to darkness. But the money was real, and money meant freedom. She could leave the borderlands, start fresh somewhere safe, build a life beyond the reach of wars and rumors. The temptation was enormous. She asked for time to consider, watching the lords depart with calculating eyes. They would return for her answer, and she would need to be ready. The game was about to begin, and the stakes were higher than ever before. That night she stood on her roof, looking out over the peaceful valley. Tomorrow might bring the greatest challenge of her life, or it might bring the chance to escape this world of shadows forever. The choice was hers alone to make. Gaza's gates, Samson's wildest feat. Gaza sprawled along the coast like a great beast basking in the Mediterranean sun. Massive walls surrounded the city, their stones worn smooth by centuries of salt wind and human ambition. 5 gates controlled access, each one a fortress within a fortress, guarded by professional soldiers who feared nothing. The city pulsed with wealth and power. Ships from distant lands crowded the harbor, their holds filled with exotic goods. Merchants haggled in a dozen languages, while slaves hauled cargo through narrow streets. The smell of spices, perfume, and human sweat blended into an intoxicating brew. Samson entered Gaza as evening shadows lengthened across the cobblestones. His reputation had preceded him, but the city was large enough for anonymity. He pulled his cloak hood forward, hiding the distinctive mane of hair that marked him as surely as a brand. The house stood in the merchant's quarter, its painted walls and carved doorframe advertising the business conducted within. The woman who greeted him was skilled in her trade, beautiful in the way of professional entertainers. She asked no questions, demanded no names. Their transaction was simple and honest. Pleasure for payment, comfort for coin. She provided what he needed without judgment or complications. In her arms, Samson found temporary escape from the weight of his calling. But Gaza's rulers were not sleeping. Word of the Hebrew giant's presence spread through the city like fire through dry grass. Guards rushed to their posts, gates were reinforced, plans were made. They would trap the demon who had slaughtered their armies. The net closed silently during the night hours. Soldiers surrounded the house, archers took positions on nearby rooftops. The gate guards received special instructions. No one leaves until dawn. No exceptions, no bribes, no mercy. Morning light revealed the trap's perfection. Every exit was watched, every escape route blocked. The city had become a prison, and Samson was the only prisoner who mattered. They would wait as long as necessary. But the Hebrew judge had his own plans. Near midnight, he rose from the woman's bed and dressed quietly. She pretended to sleep, sensing the danger that surrounded her house. This night would be remembered long after she was forgotten. Samson walked through Gaza's streets like a man taking a casual stroll. His footsteps echoed off stone walls, while hidden watchers tensed for action. He seemed unaware of the hundreds of eyes tracking his movement. The main gate loomed before him, 30 feet of oak and iron reinforced with bronze fittings. 2 massive towers flanked the entrance, their battlements bristling with armed guards. The structure represented centuries of engineering, designed to withstand siege engines and battering rams. The guards watched him approach with growing confusion. Was he surrendering? Planning some desperate assault? Their hands tightened on their weapons as the giant drew near. Samson examined the gate like a craftsman studying a fellow's work. His fingers traced the iron hinges, tested the wooden beams, measured the bronze reinforcements. Then he grasped the gates with both hands. The Spirit of God came upon him like thunder. His muscles bulged as divine strength flowed through human flesh. The massive gates groaned, their foundations shuddering under impossible pressure. Stone cracked, metal screamed, wood splintered. The gates that had protected Gaza for generations tore free from their moorings like paper dolls. Samson lifted the entire structure, posts and bars and all, raising it above his head. The guards stood frozen in disbelief. Their fortress had become a toy in the hands of a madman. Some drew weapons, others fled in terror. None dared approach the Hebrew who held their gate like a trophy. Samson began to walk, carrying his burden through the city streets. The weight that should have crushed any man felt light as a feather. Citizens stumbled from their houses, staring at the impossible sight. He walked through the night, climbing the hills that surrounded Gaza. The gate's weight never seemed to burden him. The distance never seemed to tire him. By dawn, he had reached a hilltop overlooking Hebron, 40 miles from the sea. There he set down his prize, the gates of Gaza facing toward heaven like an offering. The morning sun caught the bronze fittings, turning them to gold. The symbol of Philistine power had become a monument to Hebrew strength. The message was clear to all who saw it. No wall could contain the judge of Israel. No fortress could hold what God had set free. The city that thought itself impregnable had been humiliated by a single man. Gaza mourned its shame while Israel celebrated its champion. But Samson felt no triumph, only emptiness. The feat had been spectacular, but it solved nothing. The Philistines would rebuild their gate. Their hatred would grow stronger. The giant walked away from his monument, leaving the gates to weather and time. Somewhere in the distance, a woman named Delilah was preparing to receive her first visitors from the Philistine lords. The greatest battle of his life was about to begin. The lure of the valley, meeting Delilah. In the valley of Sorek, where ancient streams carved gentle paths through limestone hills, two destinies would collide. This valley sat between worlds, Philistine territory bleeding into Israelite lands. Merchants traveled its roads, traders pitched their tents, and here, in this borderland of cultures, the most famous betrayal in history would begin. Samson knew this valley well. He had walked these paths as a young man back when his strength felt like a gift instead of a burden. The olive groves whispered familiar songs. The fig trees offered shade from summer heat. But now, at 35, he carried the weight of 20 years of violence. His hands had killed thousands. His rage had burned entire harvests. His very name made mothers pull their children close. Yet here in Sorek, something different stirred. Word spread through the valley like morning mist. A woman of extraordinary beauty had taken residence in a house of carved stone. She spoke multiple languages. She entertained visitors with wine and stories. Her name was Delilah. Some said she came from the coast, daughter of Philistine nobles. Others whispered she was Hebrew, cast out for reasons none would speak aloud. Her past remained a mystery, but her presence commanded attention. Men traveled from distant cities just to glimpse her face. Poets composed verses about her eyes. Merchants offered fortunes for her favor. Samson first saw her at the weekly market. She moved through the crowd like water flowing around stones, graceful, unhurried, aware of every glance. Her dark hair caught sunlight like polished bronze. Her smile held secrets. When their eyes met across the sea of vendors and buyers, the world seemed to pause. She didn't look away. Most people did. His reputation preceded him everywhere. The wild man who tore lions apart, who carried city gates on his shoulders, who left armies dead in his wake. But Delilah held his gaze with steady confidence. Her lips curved in the faintest smile as if she had been expecting him. That evening, Samson found himself walking past her house. Lamplight glowed through latticed windows. The scent of jasmine drifted from her garden. He told himself he was merely exploring the valley, but his feet carried him back the next night. And the next. On the fourth evening, she appeared at her gate. She wore a robe of deep purple, the color of kings and queens. Silver bracelets caught the moonlight. Her voice carried the music of distant shores. "Samson of Dan," she said, as if they were old friends. "I wondered when you would finally speak instead of just walking." He felt like a boy caught stealing dates. This woman, this stranger, had been watching him watch her. The realization should have embarrassed him. Instead, it thrilled him. When had anyone last surprised him? "I was deciding if you were real," he said. "Beautiful women in valleys sometimes turn out to be mirages." She laughed, and the sound was like silver bells. "Touch my hand and see." He did. Her skin was warm, real, alive. But something else passed between them in that moment, a recognition, perhaps, or a warning. Later, much later, he would remember this first touch and wonder if he had felt his doom in her fingers. "Will you come in?" she asked. Her house was unlike anything he had seen. Tapestries from Egypt covered the walls, cushions from Babylon surrounded low tables, incense burned in corners, filling the air with cinnamon and myrrh. This was not the home of a simple valley woman. This was the residence of someone with connections, with wealth, with power. They talked until dawn. She asked about his travels, his battles, his life as a judge. He found himself telling stories he had never shared, not the legends people repeated, but the truth. The loneliness of strength, the burden of everyone's expectations, the way violence had become his only language with the world. She listened without judgment. Her questions were thoughtful, genuine. When he described the weight of his calling, she nodded as if she understood. When he spoke of the isolation that came with being different, her eyes showed compassion. "Do you ever wish you could be someone else?" she asked as morning light crept through the windows. "Every day," he admitted. "But this is who I was born to be." "Perhaps," she said softly, "or perhaps you could choose to be someone new." The words stayed with him as he walked home through the awakening valley. Choose to be someone new. The idea felt dangerous and wonderful. For the first time in years, he felt hope stirring in his chest. That hope would prove to be his downfall. Love or assignment? Delilah's hidden handlers. 3 days after Samson's first visit, 5 men arrived at Delilah's door. They came at twilight, when shadows grew long and neighbors shut their windows. These were not ordinary visitors. They moved with the careful grace of those accustomed to violence. Their robes were fine, their weapons finer. Their gold bore the seal of Philistine lords. The leader was Achish of Gath, a man whose smile never reached his eyes. Behind him came representatives from Ashkelon, Ashdod, Gaza, and Ekron, the 5 great cities of the Philistines. Together, they ruled a confederation that stretched from the sea to the hills. Together, they had one problem they could not solve: Samson. Delilah received them in her finest chamber. She had been expecting this visit, though not so soon. The game was beginning earlier than planned. "You honor my house," she said, offering wine from silver cups, "though I suspect this is not a social call." Achish studied her face. "Direct. Good. We prefer clarity in our arrangements." "What arrangement?" "The arrangement where you discover the secret of Samson's strength." The words hung in the air like incense smoke. Delilah's expression remained perfectly calm, but her pulse quickened. This was the moment she had prepared for, yet dreaded. "I'm not sure I understand," she said carefully. "Of course you do." Achish leaned forward. "You are the daughter of Philax of Ashkelon. Your father served our houses before his death. You were educated in our schools, trained in our ways. Did you think we wouldn't recognize you?" The mask slipped for just a moment. Delilah's past was supposed to be buried. She had spent 5 years creating a new identity, a new life. But blood called to blood, and debts passed from father to child. "That was long ago," she said. "Debts don't age like wine," said the Lord from Ekron. "They grow stronger with time." "Your father borrowed heavily to finance his trade routes," Achish continued. "When he died, those debts became yours. We've been patient. We've allowed you to build this comfortable life. But now we need payment." Delilah set down her wine cup. "What kind of payment?" "Information. Samson has killed thousands of our people. He's disrupted our trade, destroyed our crops, made us look weak before other nations. Our armies can't touch him, our weapons can't hurt him, but he's begun visiting you." "So?" "So you're going to find out why he's invincible, and then you're going to help us destroy him." The Lord from Gaza reached into his robe and produced a leather pouch. When he opened it, the room filled with the gleam of silver coins. 1,100 pieces of silver from each of our cities. 5,500 pieces total, enough to buy your freedom and live like a queen. Delilah stared at the silver. It was more money than most people saw in a lifetime. Enough to disappear forever, to start fresh in Egypt or Babylon. Enough to buy not just freedom, but power. "And if I refuse?" Achish's smile turned cold. "Then you'll discover that some debts are paid in blood." The threat was clear. These men didn't make empty promises. Cross them, and she would join her father in the grave. Serve them, and she would be rich beyond dreams. But there was a third option they hadn't considered. She could play their game and win it on her own terms. "I'll need time," she said. "How much time?" He's cautious, suspicious. If I push too hard, too fast, he'll disappear into the wilderness. Give me 2 months. Akish considered this. 1 month. If you haven't delivered by then, we'll find other methods. And if I succeed, then you'll be the woman who brought down the strongest man in the world. That's worth more than silver. After they left, Delilah sat alone in her chamber. The silver coins lay scattered on the table like fallen stars. She picked up one and held it to the lamp. The metal was warm, real, heavy, with possibility. She thought about Samson, the way he had looked at her, the loneliness in his voice, the trust beginning to bloom in his eyes. She thought about her father, who had died owing these men more than he could ever repay. She thought about her own future, hanging between freedom and death. The choice should have been simple, but as she stared at the silver, she realized something that surprised her. She actually liked Samson, maybe even more than liked him. He was dangerous, yes, but not to her. He was gentle with her, careful, almost reverent. When had anyone last treated her like something precious? The thought should have made her task impossible. Instead, it made it more complex. She would play their game, but she would play it by her own rules. She would discover Samson's secret, but she would decide what to do with it. The silver coins clinked softly as she gathered them back into the pouch. Money was useful, but information was power. And power, she was learning, was the only thing that made you truly free. Outside, night settled over the valley like a blanket. Somewhere in the darkness, Samson was probably thinking about her, planning his next visit. He had no idea that his fate was being decided in a room full of silver and shadows. First attempt. Tie me with fresh cords. Summer heat pressed down on the valley like a weight. Samson had been visiting Delilah for 3 weeks, and their evening conversations had become the brightest part of his days. He brought her figs from the hillsides, honey from wild bees, stories from his travels. She offered wine, laughter, and something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Tonight felt different. The air hummed with tension. Delilah moved around her chamber like a caged bird, arranging cushions, lighting extra lamps, pouring wine with hands that trembled just slightly. "You seem troubled," Samson said, settling onto his usual pile of cushions. "Do I?" She sat beside him, closer than usual. "Perhaps I'm just curious." "About what?" "About you, about the stories people tell." She traced patterns on his arm with one finger. "They say you're the strongest man who ever lived, that you've killed 1,000 men with a donkey's jaw, that you carried the gates of Gaza 20 miles uphill." He laughed, but the sound was uncomfortable. "People exaggerate." "Do they? Or are you truly as strong as they claim?" Something in her tone made him look at her more carefully. Her eyes were bright, almost feverish. Her body was tense, like a bowstring drawn tight. "Why do you ask?" "Because I want to know you. All of you. Your strength, your secrets, your heart." She leaned closer. "Tell me, Samson, what makes you so powerful? What's the source of your strength?" The question hit him like cold water. In all their conversations, she had never directly asked about his power. She had skirted around it, shown interest in his deeds, but never demanded answers. Now, suddenly, she was pressing him like a judge questioning a witness. "My strength comes from God," he said carefully. "But how? Through what means? Is it something you eat? Something you wear? Some ritual you perform?" He studied her face. The woman who had been so patient, so gentle, was now almost aggressive in her curiosity. Warning bells rang in his mind, the same instincts that had kept him alive through 20 years of war. "Why do you need to know?" "Because I worry about you." She grabbed his hands, and hers were shaking. "You have so many enemies. The Philistines would do anything to destroy you. If something happened to your strength, if you lost your power somehow, are you afraid I can't protect you? I'm afraid you can't protect yourself." The words sounded genuine, but something felt wrong. Samson had learned to trust his instincts. Right now, they were screaming. "If you must know," he said slowly, "my strength would leave me if I were tied with 7 fresh cords, ones that have never been dried." Delilah's eyes widened. "Fresh cords from animals just killed. If someone bound me with 7 such cords, I would become as weak as any other man." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, and it was like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Thank you for trusting me," you asked. "I did, and you answered. That means more to me than you know." The rest of the evening passed pleasantly. They talked about other things, the valley, the weather, plans for the next day. When Samson finally left, Delilah kissed his cheek and whispered, "Sleep well, my lion." But Samson didn't sleep well. He walked the hills until dawn, thinking about the questions she had asked, about the desperation in her voice, about the way she had pressed him for answers. He thought about other women he had known, his first wife who had betrayed the answer to his riddle, the harlot in Gaza who had tried to drug his wine. The pattern was always the same: beautiful women with hidden agendas, asking questions that seemed innocent but led to betrayal. Was Delilah different, or was he just hoping she was? 3 days later, she sent word that she had prepared a special dinner. When he arrived, her house was decorated with flowers. Candles flickered in every corner. She wore a gown of shimmering blue, her hair adorned with silver combs. "You look like a goddess," he said. "You look tired. Sit. Tut, I have your favorite wine." The wine was indeed his favorite, a rare vintage from the hill country. They drank and talked and laughed. The meal was perfect, the company even better. As the evening wore on, Samson felt his worries fading. "I have a surprise," Delilah said as they reclined on cushions. "What kind of surprise?" "A game, a test of your strength." Before he could respond, she produced 7 thick cords from behind a cushion. They were fresh, still damp, exactly as he had described. "Where did you get those?" he asked. "The market. A butcher owed me a favor." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I want to see if what you told me is true. Delilah, please, just this once, let me tie you up and show me how you break free. I want to see your strength with my own eyes." The request was so strange, so unexpected, that he almost laughed. But something in her manner stopped him. She was breathing fast, her hands trembling with excitement, or nerves. "This is foolish," he said. "Humor me." Against his better judgment, he allowed her to bind his arms with the cords. She worked quickly, skillfully, as if she had done this before. When she finished, 7 fresh cords held him tight. "There," she said, stepping back. "Now show me your strength." He flexed his arms. The cords snapped like thread, falling away like broken dreams. His strength had not left him. The secret he had told her was a lie. But instead of looking disappointed, Delilah looked relieved. "Magnificent," she breathed. "You're incredible. You seem surprised that I broke free." "I'm not surprised. I'm amazed. There's a difference." She helped him brush away the broken cords, her touch gentle and loving. But Samson noticed something else. She was studying the pieces, examining how they had broken, memorizing every detail. "I should go," he said. "Must you? It's still early. I have business in the morning." She walked him to the door, kissed him goodbye, whispered sweet words. But as he walked away, Samson felt the weight of certainty settling on his shoulders. Delilah was playing a game. The question was whether he was her partner or her target. Behind him, lamplight flickered in her windows, and somewhere in the darkness, he imagined he could hear the sound of silver coins changing hands. The second try, new ropes only. A week passed before Samson returned to Delilah's house. He spent the time in the wilderness, hunting, thinking, wrestling with doubts. Part of him wanted to disappear into the desert to avoid whatever trap was being laid, but a stronger part refused to run. He had never fled from a fight, and he wouldn't start now. Besides, he told himself maybe he was wrong. Maybe her questions came from love, not betrayal. Maybe he was seeing enemies where none existed. When he finally knocked on her door, Delilah greeted him with tears in her eyes. "I thought you weren't coming back," she said, throwing her arms around him. "I had things to consider." "What things?" "Whether you were who you claimed to be." She pulled back, her face showing hurt and confusion. "What do you mean?" "The other night, the chords, the questions." "It felt like a test." "It was a test," she said simply. "A test of whether you trusted me enough to be vulnerable. A test of whether I could see your strength without it frightening me." And I wasn't frightened. I was amazed. "You're not just strong in body, Samson. You're strong in spirit. That's what makes you special." Her words sounded sincere. Her tears looked real. But Samson had learned not to trust appearances. Still, when she led him inside, he followed. The house looked different tonight. Simpler. Fewer decorations, dimmer lights. She wore a plain white dress instead of elaborate gowns. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders. "I wanted tonight to be different," she explained. "No games, no tests, just us." They shared a simple meal: bread, cheese, olives, water instead of wine. Their conversation was quiet, peaceful. She told him about her childhood by the sea, about learning to swim in dangerous currents, about the way salt air could make you feel both free and homesick. "I've never felt at home anywhere," she said, "until I came to this valley, until I met you. You make it sound like destiny. Don't you believe in destiny? I believe in choices. We choose our paths, even when we pretend they're chosen for us." She was quiet for a long moment. What if someone's path was chosen for them? What if they had no real choice? Then they'd have to make the best of a bad situation. Even if it meant hurting someone they cared about? The question hung in the air like incense. Samson looked at her carefully. "Are you asking me something specific?" "I'm asking if you believe people can change, if someone who was born to do one thing could choose to do another." "I think," he said slowly, "that we all have the power to surprise ourselves." Later, as they reclined on cushions, Delilah began asking questions again. But these were different questions, softer, more subtle. "The chords didn't work," she said playfully. "You lied to me. I told you a story. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Tell me another story, then. What would really rob you of your strength?" He should have gotten up and left, should have recognized the trap, but her voice was gentle, her manner loving, and he was tired of being suspicious, tired of seeing betrayal in every glance. "New ropes," he said, "ones that have never been used. If I were bound with new ropes, my strength would fail me." "New ropes," she repeated as if memorizing the words. "But that's just another story." "Of course it is." She smiled and kissed his forehead. "You're too clever to tell me your real secrets." The next morning, Samson woke to find new ropes beside the bed. Thick ones, obviously unused, still smelling of the workshop where they were made. "Where did these come from?" he asked. Delilah was preparing breakfast, her back to him. "The rope maker's shop. I thought we might need them." "For what?" "To secure the goats. They've been getting into the grain storage." The explanation sounded reasonable, but when Samson examined the ropes, he noticed they were much too fine for securing animals. These were the kind of ropes used for ships, or for binding prisoners. "Delilah," he said carefully, "are you planning to tie me up again?" She turned, her face bright with innocence. "Would you like me to?" "No." "Then I won't. But if you changed your mind, I won't." She served him breakfast, figs, honey, fresh bread. They ate in comfortable silence. But Samson noticed she kept glancing at the ropes, as if calculating something. When he finally rose to leave, she walked him to the door. "Will I see you tonight?" "I don't know. I have matters to attend to." "What matters?" "Judge matters. You wouldn't find them interesting." She kissed him goodbye, but her lips felt cold against his cheek. As he walked away, he turned back once. She was still in the doorway, watching him go. The morning sun caught her hair, making it shine like gold. Beautiful, he thought, and dangerous. That evening, he didn't go to her house. Instead, he climbed to a high hill overlooking the valley. From there, he could see her home, her garden, her courtyard. As darkness fell, he watched 5 figures approach her door. They moved like shadows, but moonlight caught the glint of weapons, the shine of expensive robes. Philistine lords. He was sure of it. They stayed for an hour. When they left, one of them carried a small bundle, the kind of bundle that might contain new ropes. Another carried a leather pouch that clinked with the sound of coins. Samson sat on the hill until dawn, watching, thinking, understanding. Delilah was not his lover, she was his hunter, and he was her prey. The question now was what to do with this knowledge. He could disappear, vanish into the wilderness, never see her again. He could confront her, force her to admit her betrayal, or he could continue the game, see how far she would go, discover who was pulling her strings. As the sun rose over the valley, Samson made his choice. He would play her game, but he would play it by his rules. The trap was set, but the hunter was about to become the hunted. Weaving the hair, getting warmer. 2 weeks of silence stretched between them. Samson didn't visit, Delilah didn't send messages. The valley felt empty, as if holding its breath. During those long days, Delilah paced her chambers like a caged animal. The Philistine lords had made their displeasure clear. 2 attempts, 2 failures. Their patience was wearing thin. Achish had visited 3 times, each meeting more threatening than the last. "Perhaps you're not as skilled as your reputation suggests," he had said on his latest visit. "Perhaps your target is more careful than you assumed," she replied. Careful men don't visit beautiful women in the night. Careful men don't tell stories about fresh cords and new ropes. He's playing with you, girl. The question is why? Delilah had no answer for that. She only knew that Samson was slipping away, and with him, her only chance at freedom. On the 15th night, she made a decision. She would go to him. She found him at the sacred grove where he sometimes went to think. Ancient oaks formed a natural temple, their branches woven together like prayers. Samson sat beneath the largest tree, his back against the trunk, staring up at the stars. "You're avoiding me," she said, stepping into the clearing. "I'm avoiding complications." "I'm a complication?" "You're something. I haven't decided what." She sat beside him, careful not to touch. "I've missed you." "Have you?" "Every day. Every night. The house feels empty without your stories. I'm sure you've had other visitors to keep you company." The comment was casual, but it carried weight. Delilah felt her heart race. What did he know? What had he seen? "What do you mean?" "I mean, a beautiful woman living alone rarely stays alone for long." "I choose to be alone until you." "Why me?" "Because you're different. Because you see me as more than just a pretty face or a useful tool." The irony of the words hit her even as she spoke them. She was being exactly what she claimed he saw beyond, a tool, a weapon aimed at his heart. "People are rarely what they seem," he said quietly. "Are you what you seem?" "I'm exactly what I seem. A man trying to serve God while fighting his own nature. A judge who makes poor choices. A warrior who's tired of war." "Then why do you keep fighting?" "Because it's what I was born to do. Because the alternative is watching my people suffer. Because I don't know how to stop." His honesty was like a knife to her heart. Here was a man who told the truth even when it hurt, and she was lying to him with every breath. "I want to help you," she said. "How?" "I don't know, but you don't have to carry everything alone." He looked at her then, really looked at her. "You're full of surprises, Delilah." "Good surprises or bad ones? I'm still deciding." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to night sounds, owls calling, wind through leaves, the distant cry of a jackal. The moon was full, casting silver light through the branches. "Tell me about your strength," she said eventually. "Again?" "The truth this time. Not stories, not games. I want to understand you." "Why?" "Because I think your strength is also your burden, and I want to help carry it." Samson was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost dreamy. "My hair has never been cut. It's part of a vow I made before I was born. As long as my hair remains uncut, my strength remains." Delilah's breath caught. This felt different from his other answers, more personal, more real. "Your hair? The visible sign of an invisible covenant, 7 locks, never touched by blade or razor. What would happen if it were cut? I would become like any other man, weak, mortal, ordinary." "Would you want that? To be ordinary?" "Sometimes I dream about it, a simple life, a normal family, no one looking to me for salvation or revenge." "You could have that." "Could I? I think my destiny was written before I drew my first breath." Delilah reached out and touched one of his locks. The hair was thick, coarse, shot through with silver. It fell to his shoulders in 7 distinct braids, each one carefully maintained. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's a chain, a golden chain, but still a chain." "Then why not break it?" "Because some chains are also anchors. Cut them, and you drift away from everything that matters." She continued to stroke his hair, feeling the texture, the weight, the life in it. This was the secret. This was the source of his power, and he had just handed it to her like a gift. "I should go," she said. "Should you?" "Yes, before I do something we'll both regret." She stood to leave, but he caught her hand. "Delilah." "Yes? Whatever you're thinking, whatever you're planning, remember this moment. Remember that I trusted you." The words were like arrows to her heart. She pulled away and fled through the trees, tears streaming down her face. Behind her, Samson remained beneath the oak, watching her go, his 7 locks shining silver in the moonlight. The next morning, she sent a message to the Philistine lords. 3 words, "Come tonight. Ready." But even as she prepared for betrayal, she wondered if she could go through with it. The memory of his trust burned in her chest like poison. The feel of his hair in her fingers seemed to mock her. She had the secret now. The question was whether she had the courage to use it. That evening, she prepared her house with special care. She laid out her finest robes, her sharpest knife, her strongest wine. She practiced the movements she would need, how to approach him, how to position herself, how to make the cuts without waking him. But when the sun set and the appointed hour arrived, she found herself paralyzed. The knife felt heavy in her hands. The wine tasted like ash in her mouth. She had betrayed many people in her life, but she had never betrayed someone who loved her. And despite everything, despite the lies and the games and the silver coins, she was beginning to suspect that Samson might actually love her. The thought should have made her task easier. Instead, it made it impossible. Outside, footsteps approached her door, the Philistine lords coming to collect their prize. But Delilah had no prize to offer, only questions and guilt and the terrible knowledge that she was trapped between two men who would destroy her, the one who trusted her and the ones who owned her. The betrayal was close now. She could feel it approaching like a storm. But whether she would be its agent or its victim remained to be seen. The emotional breakdown. How can you say you love me? 3 days after the meeting in the grove, Delilah's world began to crumble. The Philistine lords had grown tired of patience. Achish arrived at her door with an ultimatum: deliver Samson's secret within 1 week or face the consequences. The threat was clear: silver or blood, but no more delays. That same evening, Samson returned to her house. He looked tired, older somehow, as if the weight of years had settled on his shoulders overnight. When she offered him wine, he declined. When she tried to embrace him, he stepped away. You seem troubled, she said. I am troubled. About what? About you, about us, about what this is becoming. Her heart began to race. What do you mean? I mean, I know you're not what you pretend to be. I know people are using you. I know you're caught between forces you can't control. The words hit her like physical blows. He knew. Somehow, he knew everything. I don't understand what you're saying, she managed. Don't you? Then let me be clearer. I know about your meetings with the Philistine lords. I know about the silver they've promised you. I know about the debts you're trying to pay. Delilah sank onto a cushion, her legs suddenly weak. How? I'm not just strong, Delilah. I'm also experienced. I've survived 20 years of war by learning to read people, to see through lies, to spot traps before they close. Then why did you keep coming here? Why did you keep telling me things? Because I was hoping I was wrong. Because I wanted to believe you were different from all the others who tried to use me. I am different. Are you? Then why do you keep asking about my strength? Why do you keep trying to find my weakness? The accusations poured out like water from a broken dam. Each one was true, and each one cut deeper than the last. Delilah felt tears streaming down her face, but she didn't know if they were from guilt or fear or something else entirely. You don't understand, she whispered. Then explain it to me. I can't. It's too complicated. Try me. She looked at him, really looked at him. His face was stern, but not cruel. His eyes held disappointment, but also something else. Hope, maybe, or love. The realization that he might actually love her despite everything made her sob harder. My father, she began, then stopped. My father owed them money. When he died, the debt became mine. They found me 5 years ago, gave me this house, this life, but it all came with a price. What price? Service. When they needed something done, I would do it. Information gathered, men seduced, secrets stolen. It was supposed to be a life of luxury, but it was really a life of slavery. And now they want my secret. They want you destroyed. They don't care how it happens, as long as it happens soon. What did they threaten you with? Death. My father's death was not natural, Samson. They killed him when he couldn't pay. They'll kill me too if I don't deliver what they want. Samson was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentler. So you're trapped. Completely trapped. If I betray you, I lose the only good thing in my life. If I don't betray you, I lose my life entirely. What do you want to do? I want to run away with you. I want to disappear into the desert, or sail across the sea, or find some place where neither of us has to be what we were born to be. That's not possible. Why not? Because I'm the judge of Israel. I can't abandon my people, and because you're not the kind of woman who runs from problems. How do you know what kind of woman I am? Because I've watched you for weeks. I've seen how you think, how you move, how you solve problems. You're not a runner, Delilah. You're a fighter. Then help me fight. How? Tell me the truth. Give me the real secret of your strength. Let me have something genuine to bargain with. The request hung between them like a blade. Samson stared at her, and she could see the war raging behind his eyes, trust warring with caution, love fighting against experience. If I tell you the truth, he said slowly, will you use it against me? I don't know, she answered honestly. I wish I could promise you safety, but I can't. All I can promise is that I'll try to find another way. That's not much of a guarantee. It's all I have. Days passed in terrible tension. Delilah could feel time running out like sand through an hourglass. The Philistine lords sent messages, subtle threats wrapped in polite language. Her servants reported strange men watching the house. The walls seemed to be closing in. Meanwhile, Samson continued his visits, but something had changed between them. The easy laughter was gone. The comfortable silences felt strained. They were both waiting for something to break. On the sixth night, Delilah finally cracked. Samson arrived to find her pacing like a caged animal, her face streaked with tears, her hair wild with frustration. I can't do this anymore, she said without preamble. Do what? Pretend. Smile. Act like everything is normal when my world is falling apart. What do you want from me? I want you to trust me completely or leave me completely. This halfway thing is killing me. Why? Because I love you. The words exploded from her like arrows from a bow. I love you and you don't trust me, and they're going to kill me if I don't deliver your secret, and I don't know what to do. Samson stepped back as if struck. You love me? Yes, you fool. I love your strength and your gentleness and your terrible jokes and the way you look at the stars like they might tell you secrets. I love that you're trying to save a people who don't always appreciate you. I love that you're lonely and brave and completely impossible. Then why? Because love doesn't solve everything. Because I'm still trapped. Because loving you doesn't change the fact that they'll kill me if I don't betray you. She collapsed onto a cushion, sobbing with exhaustion and despair. How can you say you love me when you won't trust me? How can you claim to care about me when you won't help me find a way out of this? Samson knelt beside her, his face tortured. Because I've been betrayed before. Because everyone who's ever claimed to love me has eventually sold me out. Because trust is the hardest thing in the world for someone like me. Someone like you? Someone who knows that his strength makes him valuable, not lovable. Someone who's learned that people want to possess his power, not cherish his heart. I'm not them. Aren't you? You're asking for the same thing they all asked for, my secret, my weakness, my vulnerability. I'm asking because I need it to survive, not because I want to destroy you. And if survival means my destruction, the question hung in the air like poison. Delilah looked at him through her tears, seeing the pain in his eyes, the terrible knowledge that love might not be enough to save either of them. I don't know, she whispered. God help me, I don't know. They held each other then, two people caught in a trap neither had set but both had walked into. Outside, the valley slept peacefully, unaware that the fate of nations might depend on the choice between love and survival. The deadline was tomorrow, and still neither of them knew what they would choose when the moment came. The confession. No razor has ever touched my head. The final night arrived like an executioner. Delilah had received her last message from the Philistine lords that morning, 3 words written in blood-red ink: tonight or never. She spent the day in preparation, though she still wasn't sure what she was preparing for. Death, perhaps, or betrayal, or some third option that hadn't yet revealed itself. When evening came, she dressed in pure white, a gown of silk that made her look like a temple priestess. She arranged her hair in simple braids. She lit candles throughout the house, creating pools of golden light in an ocean of shadow. Samson arrived as the sun touched the horizon. He looked haggard, as if he hadn't slept in days. When she opened the door, he stood there for a long moment, studying her face. You look like you're dressed for a funeral, he said. Maybe I am. Whose? I'm not sure yet. He followed her inside, moving like a man walking to his doom. The house felt different tonight, charged with electricity, heavy with possibility. Every shadow seemed to hide secrets. Every flicker of candlelight suggested movement. They sat together on cushions, but didn't touch. The distance between them felt like an ocean. They came to see me today, Delilah said. The lords? Yes, They're done waiting, done making threats. Tomorrow, either you're their prisoner or I'm their corpse. What did you tell them? Nothing. But they're not going to accept nothing anymore. Samson was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I've been thinking about what you said, about love and trust. And I think you're right. If I truly love you, I should trust you completely. And if I truly trust you, I should give you what you need to survive. Delilah's heart began to race. What are you saying? I'm saying that I'm tired of games, tired of lies, tired of testing each other like enemies instead of loving each other like whatever we are. What are we, Samson? I don't know, but I'd like the chance to find out. He reached out and took her hands. His were warm, calloused from years of fighting, gentle despite their strength. Ask me again, he said. Ask you what? Ask me about my strength, about the real source of it, about the truth I've never told anyone. Delilah felt tears gathering in her eyes. Are you sure? No, but I'm going to do it anyway. She took a deep breath. Tell me, Samson, what is the real secret of your strength? My hair, he said simply. No razor has ever touched my head. From the day I was born, my hair has been sacred to God. As long as it remains uncut, I remain strong. If it were shaved away, my strength would leave me forever. The words hit her like physical blows. This was it. The real secret, the actual truth. He had given her everything she needed to destroy him. Your hair, she repeated. 7 locks, never touched by blade. My mother told me the angel's words before I was even born. No razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb. And if someone cut it while you slept, I would wake up weak. Ordinary. Just another man who could be captured, chained, killed. Delilah stared at him, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he had just done. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked me to choose between love and caution. I choose love. Even though you know what I might do with this information? I know what you might do. I'm hoping for what you will do. Which is? Find another way. You're clever, Delilah, clever enough to play their game without destroying me. Clever enough to save yourself without sacrificing us. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face like rain. You're putting your life in my hands. I'm putting my life in your heart. There's a difference. What if my heart isn't strong enough? What if the fear wins? Then I'll face whatever comes. But at least I'll face it knowing that I trusted someone completely, that I loved someone enough to be vulnerable. Samson, no more questions tonight. No more secrets. No more walls between us. He pulled her close, and she collapsed against his chest, sobbing with relief and terror. They held each other as the candles burned lower. They talked about dreams, about futures that might never come, about the possibility of peace in a world built on violence. For a few hours, they pretended they were just a man and woman in love, with no destinies to fulfill, no debts to pay, no enemies circling like wolves. But outside, the night was full of watchers. Philistine soldiers hidden in olive groves, servants purchased with silver, lords waiting for the signal that would change the balance of power in the region. As dawn approached, Samson finally fell asleep, his head in Delilah's lap. She looked down at his face, peaceful in slumber, and traced the lines of his features with her eyes. His hair spread across her legs like spun gold, each lock distinct, each one containing the power to topple kingdoms. The knife lay on the table beside her, sharp enough to cut through anything, ready for use. The choice was before her now, stark and final. Love or survival, trust or betrayal. The man who had given her everything, or the lords who would kill her if she gave them nothing. Her hand moved toward the knife, then stopped. Moved again, then pulled back. The war in her heart raged as fierce as any battle Samson had ever fought. Outside, the first birds began to sing, welcoming a dawn that would change everything. In a few hours, someone would be betrayed. Someone would be captured. Someone would discover the price of trust in a world built on deception. But for now, in the last moments before the storm, a man and woman sat together in silence, surrounded by shadows and secrets, holding on to love while they still could. The shave, fall of the strongest man. The knife trembled in Delilah's hand like a living thing. Samson slept peacefully, his breathing deep and even, his massive frame relaxed in complete trust. His hair spread across her lap like golden threads in the candlelight. 7 locks, each one thick as a rope, each one holding the power of armies. She had been sitting this way for hours, paralyzed between love and survival. The windows showed the first pale hints of dawn. Soon the Philistine lords would expect their answer. Soon she would have to choose. Her fingers traced one of his locks, feeling the coarse texture, the weight of years. Such ordinary hair, such extraordinary power. It seemed impossible that cutting it could change anything, yet she had seen his strength with her own eyes. If he said his power lay in his hair, then his power lay in his hair. "I love you," she whispered to his sleeping form. "I hope someday you'll understand." The knife was sharp, freshly honed. It would cut through hair like silk. A few quick cuts, and the strongest man in the world would become helpless as a child. She raised the blade. Her hand shook so violently she nearly dropped it. Tears streamed down her face, falling onto his hair like morning dew. This was wrong. Every fiber of her being screamed that this was wrong. But the alternative was death. Not just her death. The lords had made it clear that anyone who helped her would die too. Her servants, her friends, anyone who had shown her kindness. Their blood would be on her hands if she refused. She thought about her father, who had died for his debts, about the years she had lived as a slave dressed as a queen, about the silver coins that could buy her freedom or the blade that would end her life. The knife moved closer to his hair. Samson stirred slightly and she froze. If he woke now, if he saw her with the blade, what would he do? Kill her for the betrayal? Or simply leave, taking his trust and his love with him? He settled back into sleep, murmuring her name. The sound broke her heart. "Forgive me," she breathed, and brought the knife to his hair. The first lock came away with surprising ease. Thick golden strands fell to the floor like autumn leaves. Samson didn't stir. His breathing remained steady, peaceful, unaware. The second lock, the third, each cut felt like a betrayal, like a piece of her soul being carved away. But his hair kept falling, and his sleep continued undisturbed. By the fourth lock, she noticed something changing. The air in the room felt different, heavier somehow, less charged with power. The very atmosphere seemed to be shifting. The fifth lock, the sixth. His hair was growing shorter, his scalp more visible. Soon only one lock remained, the longest one, the one that had never been cut since birth. Delilah paused, the knife hovering over the final strand. This was the moment. Once this last lock fell, there would be no going back. Samson would be helpless, and she would be a betrayer forever. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and made the final cut. The last lock fell to the floor with a soft whisper. Immediately, the change was palpable. The room felt empty, hollow, as if some great presence had suddenly departed. The air no longer hummed with hidden energy. Even the candlelight seemed dimmer. Delilah sat perfectly still, holding her breath. Had it worked? Was the strongest man in the world now just another man? She needed to know. Gently, carefully, she shifted position, moving his head from her lap to a cushion. He stirred but didn't wake. She stood and backed away, studying his face for any sign of change. He looked the same strong jaw, the same broad shoulders, the same massive frame. But something indefinable was different. He looked ordinary, mortal, vulnerable. "Samson," she called softly, "the Philistines are upon you." It was the same call she had made during their games with the cords and ropes. Each time before, he had awakened instantly, alert and ready for battle. This time, he stirred slowly, groggily, like any man waking from deep sleep. "What?" he mumbled, his voice thick with confusion. "The Philistines. They're here." He sat up, looking around the room with bleary eyes. Then he saw his hair scattered on the floor. Saw the knife in her hand. Saw the truth written on her face. "What have you done?" he whispered. "What I had to do." He reached up and touched his scalp, feeling the short stubble where his locks had been. "My hair, I'm sorry. You cut it all. I had no choice." He stood, swaying slightly. For a moment he looked like he might collapse, then his eyes blazed with fury. "You betrayed me. I saved myself. By destroying me. I warned you. I told you what they would do to me if I didn't. And I trusted you anyway." The pain in his voice was worse than any scream. Delilah had heard men cry out in agony, had seen warriors weep over fallen comrades, but she had never heard anything like the sound Samson made, a deep animal howl of betrayal and loss. Outside, she could hear movement, footsteps, voices. The Philistine soldiers moving into position. They had been waiting for her signal, and now they were closing in. "Al, they're coming," she said. "Let them come." He stood and faced the door, his hands clenched into fists. "I'll fight them with my bare hands if I have to." "Samson, no. You don't understand. Your strength, my strength comes from God, not from hair." He strode toward the door, every inch the warrior he had always been. But when he tried to lift the wooden bar that secured the entrance, something terrible happened. Nothing. The bar, which he could have snapped like a twig the day before, might as well have been made of iron. He strained against it, his muscles bulging with effort, but it wouldn't budge. The truth hit him like a physical blow. He staggered backwards, staring at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. "I am weak," he whispered. "Truly weak." The door exploded inward. Philistine soldiers poured through the opening like a flood. They had come prepared for a battle with the strongest man alive. Instead, they found a broken giant staring at his own hands in disbelief. "Take him," called a voice from outside. Achish, savoring his moment of triumph. They fell upon Samson like wolves on wounded prey. He fought them, but his blows carried no more force than any ordinary man's. They overwhelmed him with numbers, binding his arms with chains, forcing him to his knees. "The great judge of Israel," Achish said, stepping into the room. "Not so great after all." He looked at Delilah, who stood frozen against the wall, the knife still in her hand. "Well done. You've earned your silver." One of the soldiers produced a leather pouch and threw it at her feet. Coins spilled across the floor, 1,100 pieces of silver from each of the 5 cities. The price of the strongest man in the world. Delilah stared at the silver, but didn't move to collect it. The coins caught the candlelight, gleaming like stars, beautiful and cold and somehow wrong. "Take him away," Achish ordered. They dragged Samson toward the door. As they passed Delilah, he looked at her one last time. His eyes held no anger now, only infinite sadness. "I loved you," he said quietly. "I actually loved you." "I know," she whispered back. "I loved you too. Then why? Because love wasn't enough." They pulled him away into the growing dawn. Delilah listened to the sounds of his capture, the clanking of chains, the rough voices of soldiers, the scrape of feet on stone. Then silence. She sank to the floor, surrounded by scattered hair and silver coins. The strongest man in the world was gone. The most dangerous enemy of the Philistines was captured. And she, Delilah of the Valley of Sorek, had traded love for survival. The candles were burning low, their flames dancing like ghosts. Outside, the sun was rising on a new world, a world where Samson the judge was just another prisoner, and she was the woman who had brought him low. She had won. She was free. She was rich. She had never felt more empty in her life. The capture, blind and bound. The courtyard of the Philistine stronghold echoed with celebration. Torches blazed against the pre-dawn darkness. Soldiers crowded around their prize, shouting and laughing like children with a new toy. At the center of it all, Samson knelt in chains, his head bowed, his newly shorn scalp gleaming in the firelight. Lord Achish stood before him, savoring the moment. 20 years of warfare, 20 years of humiliation, countless defeats at the hands of this one man. And now, finally, victory. The mighty judge of Israel, he said, loud enough for all to hear, brought low by a woman's blade. The soldiers cheered. Some spat at Samson's feet. Others poked him with spear points, testing whether any of his legendary strength remained. He didn't react. He sat like a statue, staring at the ground, lost in the devastation of his betrayal. "Nothing to say?" Achish taunted. "No threats? No promises of revenge? How disappointing. I expected more from the man who killed 1,000 of my people with a donkey's jaw." Still Samson said nothing. His silence seemed to unnerve some of the soldiers. They had come expecting to battle a giant. Instead, they found a broken man who offered no resistance, no defiance, no spark of his former fire. "Perhaps he's planning something," suggested one of the captains. "Perhaps this is another trick." "No trick," Achish said confidently. "Look at him. Really look. The power is gone. You can see it in his eyes, empty as dry wells." It was true. Where once Samson's gaze had burned with divine fire, now there was only hollow darkness. He looked like a man who had lost not just his strength, but his purpose, his identity, his very soul. "What shall we do with him, my lord?" asked the captain. Achish smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "We make an example. We show the world what happens to those who defy Philistine power." He gestured to 2 soldiers carrying instruments that gleamed wickedly in the torchlight. Bronze needles, thin as reeds, sharp as serpents' fangs. "His eyes," Akish commanded. "Take his eyes." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Even the celebrating soldiers grew quiet. Blinding a prisoner was not uncommon, but this felt different. This was the destruction of a legend. Samson finally looked up. When he saw the needles, something flickered in his expression. Not fear, but sadness so deep it seemed to come from the earth itself. "Will this bring back your dead?" he asked quietly. "No," Akish admitted, "but it will prevent you from creating more." "I have no strength left to create anything. You've already taken everything that mattered." "Not everything. You still have your sight. You can still see the sky, the sun, the faces of people. That's too much mercy for a man who's killed so many of mine." The soldiers approached with their terrible tools. Samson didn't struggle. He closed his eyes and waited for the darkness that would never end. The first needle went in clean and quick. A sound escaped his throat, not quite a scream, not quite a moan, but something between them. The second needle followed. Blood ran down his cheeks like tears of fire. When it was over, Samson sat blind and broken in the dust. The soldiers stepped back, their work complete. The man who had once seen eagles soaring in distant skies would never see anything again. "Chain him," Akish ordered. "Bronze shackles on his wrists and ankles, and make them heavy. I want him to feel their weight with every step." They bound him with chains thick as ship's cables. The bronze was cold against his skin and heavier than any burden he had ever carried. When they hauled him to his feet, he swayed like a tree in a storm. "Where shall we take him?" asked the captain. "Gaza. To the prison there. Let him grind grain like a common slave. Let the people see what's become of their mighty judge." They forced him to walk, stumbling blind through streets he couldn't see. People lined the roads to watch, Philistines cheering, a few Israelites weeping. The procession moved slowly, partly because of Samson's blindness, partly because Hish wanted to savor every moment of the humiliation. As they walked, word spread through the land like wildfire. Runners carried the news to every city, every village, every settlement within 100 miles. Samson the judge had fallen. The strongest man in Israel was a prisoner. The age of Philistine dominance had truly begun. In her house in the valley of Sorek, Delilah heard the news from a breathless messenger. She listened in silence, her face showing nothing. When he finished his tale, she paid him a silver coin and sent him away. Alone again, she walked through rooms that still smelled of Samson's presence. His hair lay scattered on the floor where she had dropped it. She gathered it up, strand by strand, and held it to her face. It smelled like olive oil and sunlight and the wind across desert hills. She wept then, for the first time since the betrayal. Not from guilt, she had made her choice and would live with it, but from loss. The house felt empty without his laughter. The valley felt smaller without his stories. The world felt colder without his impossible, beautiful strength. Outside Gaza, the prison gates opened with a grinding of metal on stone. Samson was pushed inside into a world of shadows and despair. They chained him to a great millstone, larger than any wheel, heavier than any burden. His job would be to push it in endless circles, grinding grain for his captor's bread. "Welcome to your new home," the guard said with a laugh. "Hope you like the accommodations." Samson said nothing. He felt his way around the millstone until he found the pushing bar. Then he began to walk, step by step, circle by circle, grinding grain in the darkness. The other prisoners watched in amazement. This was Samson? This blind, broken man was the hero of their people? Some whispered encouragement. Others turned away in despair. Their champion had become just another slave. But something they didn't notice was that his hair was beginning to grow. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the stubble on his scalp was lengthening. Day by day, week by week, the locks that held his power were returning. The Philistines had made one crucial mistake. They thought destroying Samson's strength was a one-time event. They thought cutting his hair was a permanent solution. They were wrong. In the darkness of the prison, as he pushed the millstone in endless circles, Samson began to pray. Not for rescue, not for revenge, but for one more chance. One final opportunity to serve the God who had given him strength, to strike a blow for the people who had called him judge. His prayers rose like incense from the grinding floor, and slowly, inexorably, his hair began to grow. Samson in chains, grinding in Gaza. The bronze shackles weigh heavy on his wrists. Each step echoes through the prison walls of Gaza. The man who once carried city gates now stumbles in darkness. His world has become stone and shadow. Every morning, the guards lead him to the grinding mill. Round and round he walks, turning the massive stone wheel that crushes grain into flour. The very hands that tore lions apart now push grain for his captor's bread. The irony tastes bitter in the dusty air. Children gather to watch the blind giant work. They throw pebbles and laugh when he flinches. Their mothers pull them back, whispering warnings about the monster who killed thousands. But curiosity wins. They always return to stare. His hair begins to grow, slowly like hope returning to a broken heart. The guards don't notice at first. Why would they? Hair seems harmless now. They've seen him stumble, heard him weep in the night. This broken man poses no threat. The Philistine lords visit sometimes. They come to gloat to see their greatest enemy reduced to an animal. They speak as if he cannot hear them, as if blindness has stolen his other senses too. They discuss their victories, their expanding territories, their plans for permanent rule. He listens, he remembers, he waits. The mill becomes his world. 10 steps forward, turn, 10 steps back. The rhythm never changes. His feet wear grooves in the stone floor. His shoulders grow stronger from the endless pushing. His body adapts, but his spirit burns with quiet fury. Some days he feels God's presence like a whisper in the wind. Other days, silence stretches endless as his darkened world. He prays anyway, not for strength or revenge, but for purpose, for one last chance to matter. The guards grow careless. They drink wine while he works. They gamble with dice and forget to watch him closely. Why bother? Where can a blind man run? What damage can he do without his legendary power? His hair grows longer. His neck feels stronger. Small signs, but he notices everything now. Touch has become his new sight. Sound tells him stories sight once did. The scrape of sandals warns him when visitors approach. The clink of weapons tells him how many guards stand near. Fellow prisoners whisper his name with reverence and pity. Some remember when he fought for Israel. Others only know him as the fool who trusted the wrong woman. Both stories are true, both cut deep. His hands grow calloused from the grinding stone. His back aches from the endless walking. But something else grows too. Patience. The wild young man who acted on every impulse has learned to wait, to think, to plan. The Philistines celebrate their victory daily. Wine flows freely in the streets of Gaza. Music echoes from their temples. They've captured the judge of Israel. Their god Dagon has proven stronger than the Hebrew god, or so they believe. He thinks of Delilah sometimes, not with rage anymore, but with something closer to understanding. She made her choice. He made his. Both led here, to this grinding mill, to this darkness, to this strange peace that comes before the storm. His hair reaches his shoulders now, still short by his old standards, but growing. Each strand carries the memory of his vow, the promise made before his birth, the covenant he broke and might yet honor again. The mill wheel turns. The grain becomes flour. The strong man grows stronger in ways his captors cannot see. And in the darkness of his prison, Samson waits for God to remember him. Delilah's aftermath, riches and silence. She disappears from the story like smoke and wind. One moment she stands at the center of history's greatest betrayal. The next, she's gone. Vanished into the gaps between verses, leaving only questions and theories behind. Did she collect her silver? 5,500 pieces gleaming in the torchlight. Enough wealth to buy estates, servants, a lifetime of comfort. The Philistine lords were men of their word when it came to business. They needed her cooperation, and payment seals loyalty better than threats. Some imagine her fleeing immediately, grabbing her reward and running before anyone could blame her for what came next. Smart women know when to disappear. They understand that those who betray giants rarely stay safe long among the giants' people. Others picture her staying, watching from shadows as they dragged Samson away. Did she feel triumph? Relief? Or did something twist in her chest when she saw blood running from his ruined eyes? The biblical text offers no comfort to our curiosity. It simply drops her name from the narrative. Writers of ancient texts cared little for what happened to supporting players once their role was done. History moves forward, characters get left behind, yet her silence speaks volumes. She never appears again in any record. No marriage announcements, no property purchases, no diplomatic missions for her Philistine masters. It's as if the earth swallowed her whole the moment Samson's hair hit the floor. Perhaps she bought passage on a merchant ship. The Mediterranean stretched wide and welcoming for those with enough gold. Egypt needed skilled workers, Babylon welcomed clever foreigners, Cyprus offered isolation from the past, a woman with her particular talents could prosper anywhere men made foolish decisions about love, or maybe she stayed closer to home but changed everything about herself. New name, new clothes, new story. The woman who brought down Samson becomes a merchant's widow from Ashdod, a weaver from Gath, a priestess serving some minor goddess in a forgettable temple. The silver itself tells a story. 5,500 pieces would weigh nearly 200 pounds, not the kind of wealth you stuff in a travel bag. She would need carts, guards, careful planning. Moving that much metal meant leaving tracks, yet no tracks remain. Some scholars suggest she never lived at all. That Delilah was invented later, a symbol rather than a person, the seductive foreign woman who leads good men astray. Every culture needs this story. Every generation tells it again with different names, but the details feel too real for pure invention. The way she asks her questions, the patience she shows, the specific number of silver pieces. Fiction tends toward round numbers and simple motivations. Real life deals in odd amounts and complex choices. Her name means languishing or delicate in Hebrew, fitting for a woman who weakened the strongest man alive. Yet names can be chosen, changed, forgotten. What parents called her at birth might have vanished with everything else. Did she have children? A family counting on her success? Was this betrayal born from love for people we never meet? The money could feed many mouths, provide many dowries, secure many futures. Perhaps she sacrificed one man to save dozens of others. Or was she already part of the Philistine intelligence network, a professional spy who seduced targets for information? Samson just happened to be her most famous assignment. In this version, the romance was always theater. The tears were calculated. The love was a lie from the first touch. The rabbis of later centuries created elaborate stories about her fate. Some said she died in the temple collapse, crushed alongside Samson and his other victims. Others claimed she lived to old age, haunted by nightmares and the weight of her choice. All these tales seek to provide the justice the original story lacks, but perhaps her disappearance is the point. She remains mysterious because mystery suits her role in the larger story. She becomes every temptation, every betrayal, every moment when love and loyalty clash with survival and self-interest. The silver bought her freedom from history's judgment. In vanishing so completely, she achieved something rare among biblical characters. She escaped definition. She refused to be pinned down to a single interpretation or fate. Delilah's silence continues to speak. Her absence echoes louder than presence might have. And in the space where her ending should be, every reader writes their own version of justice, mercy, or understanding. The Feast of Dagon, Triumph of the Philistines. The great temple of Dagon rises from Gaza's heart like a mountain of carved stone. Its pillars stretch toward heaven, thick as ancient trees, strong as the earth itself. Today, 3,000 Philistines pack its halls to celebrate their greatest victory. The air thrums with voices, music, and the scent of roasted meat. Wine flows from golden cups. Servants weave between the crowds carrying platters of bread, figs, and honey cakes. Children dart between adult legs, their laughter mixing with deeper voices raised in song. This is more than a festival. This is vindication of everything the Philistines believe about power, gods, and destiny. The 5 lords of the Philistine cities sit on raised platforms, their finest robes catching torchlight. Gold chains circle their necks. Silver rings flash on their fingers. These are the men who ordered Delilah's mission, who paid her price, who now reap the rewards of patient planning and cold strategy. Dagon's statue dominates the temple's heart. Half man, half fish, carved from black stone and inlaid with precious metals. Incense burns at his feet. Priests chant prayers of thanksgiving in the ancient tongue. Their god has proven himself stronger than the Hebrew deity. The evidence grinds grain in the prison below. Musicians play harps, flutes, and drums. Dancers spin between the pillars, their movements telling the story of Samson's capture. One performer plays the mighty judge, flexing and posturing. Another portrays Delilah, all graceful gestures and knowing smiles. When she mimes cutting his hair, the crowd roars approval. The celebration has lasted 3 days already. Each dawn brings new visitors from outlying towns. They come to see the temple where their enemy will be displayed. to drink wine in honor of their god's triumph, to feel safe for the first time in 20 years. Stories spread through the crowd like ripples in water. Tales of Samson's legendary strength grow larger with each telling. The man who killed 1,000 warriors, who carried city gates, who set fields ablaze with foxes and torches. Making him sound invincible makes their victory seem even greater. Children who have never seen him imagine a monster 10 feet tall with claws for hands. Adults who remember his raids speak in hushed tones about the day he appeared like divine wrath made flesh. All agree that capturing him proves their superiority over the scattered tribes of Israel. The priests declare this the greatest victory in Philistine history, greater than their conquest of the coastal cities, more significant than their mastery of ironworking. This is spiritual triumph, proof that Dagon watches over his people and delivers their enemies into their hands. Merchants hawk souvenirs outside the temple, clay figures of Samson in chains, miniature scissors commemorating his downfall, scrolls telling the story of Delilah's clever betrayal. Even defeat becomes commerce when victory tastes this sweet. The mood grows more festive as evening approaches. Someone suggests bringing out the star attraction. The crowd takes up the chant. Bring out Samson! Let us see the fallen giant! Show us the blind judge of Israel! The lords exchange glances. They had planned to save this moment for the festival's climax. But the people demand entertainment. Wine has loosened their inhibitions. They want to see their conquered enemy with their own eyes, to mock him, to feel powerful in his presence. Guards are summoned, orders given, the crowd grows quiet with anticipation. Even the musicians stop playing. 3,000 people hold their breath, waiting to see the man who haunted their dreams for 2 decades. The great doors at the temple's rear swing open. Torchlight spills into the corridor beyond. Footsteps echo on stone floors. Someone is coming. Someone is being brought. The moment they have all waited for is about to arrive. The celebration reaches its peak just as the sun begins to set. Golden light streams through the temple's windows, painting everything in warm hues. The perfect lighting for the perfect moment. The Philistines have arranged their triumph down to the smallest detail. Dagon's statue seems to smile in the flickering light. The god of grain and sea watches over his people's greatest hour. The temple he has protected for centuries will witness the final humiliation of Israel's champion. Victory tastes sweeter when savored slowly. The crowd presses forward, eager for their first glimpse of the legend-made flesh. They expect to see a broken animal, a shell of former strength. What they get is something else entirely, something that will change everything in ways they cannot imagine. The last prayer, remember me just once more. They lead him between the pillars like a prize bull brought for sacrifice. His bare feet feel the smooth stone worn by countless worshippers. His fingers trace the carved walls as guards guide him forward. Every step takes him deeper into the heart of his enemy's power. The noise hits him first. 3,000 voices creating a wall of sound that seems to push against his chest. Laughter, jeers, conversations, music, all blending into one great roar of celebration. They have come to see him, to mock him, to feel safe in his presence. Someone throws something that strikes his shoulder. Fruit, maybe, or bread. Others follow suit. A rain of small objects pelts his body while the crowd shrieks with delight. The blind giant flinches and stumbles. Their former terror has become their entertainment. Look at him now, voices call out. Where is your strength, son of Manoah? Can your God save you from our chains? Dance for us, mighty judge. The taunts come from every direction. He cannot see their faces, but he hears their joy in his suffering. The guards position him between 2 massive pillars at the temple's center. His hands naturally reach out to steady himself. The stone feels warm from the press of bodies and burning torches. These pillars hold up the roof over the main hall. They bear the weight of tons of carved stone and timber. He runs his palms over the smooth surfaces, traces the decorative carvings with careful fingers, measures their thickness with his outstretched arms. The builder in him, trained by years of construction work, begins to understand what he touches. Perform for us, someone shouts. Others take up the demand. They want him to show his strength, to bend iron bars or lift heavy stones. They don't understand that his power never came from his muscles alone. It came from his covenant, his vow, his uncut hair. A young guard leans close, speaking low so others cannot hear. They want a show, old man. Give them something, or this will get worse. There is almost kindness in his voice. Perhaps he has children of his own. Perhaps he remembers when he feared the name of Samson. But Samson barely hears him. His attention turns inward, toward a conversation more important than any earthly voice. His lips move silently, forming words meant for ears that hear beyond human perception. Words that rise above the temple's noise toward the God who once made him strong. Sovereign Lord, he whispers, his voice lost in the crowd's roar. Remember me. The prayer comes from depths deeper than his ruined eyes, from places where strength was born and hope still flickers like dying flame. His hair has grown, not to its former length, but enough. Enough for the vow to mean something again. Enough for the covenant to hold weight. Enough for one last miracle if God still listens to broken promises and desperate pleas. Please, God, he continues, pressing his forehead against the cold stone, strengthen me just once more. The request is simple, clean, free from pride or grand plans. He asks not for victory or vindication, but for the power to end what he began. The crowd grows more restless. They want action, spectacle, proof of their dominance over Israel's champion. Someone suggests bringing hot coals to make him dance. Others propose chains and whips. The celebration takes on a darker tone as wine and mob mentality merge. Samson feels the pillars under his hands, senses their crucial role in holding up the massive roof, understands with builder's instinct how much force would be needed to shift them from their foundations. The math is simple. The physics are clear. The consequences are absolute. Let me die with the Philistines, he adds to his prayer. The words carry no anger, no hatred, just tired resolution. He has lived as a fool, loved as a fool, trusted as a fool. Perhaps he can die as something better, something useful, something final. His muscles tense, not with human strength, but with something flowing from beyond human limits. The same power that once helped him tear apart lions and carry city gates now fills him one last time. Gift and curse, blessing and weapon, all wrapped in the simple prayer of a broken man. The crowd calls for blood. The guards grow nervous. The lords prepare to give more violent orders. None of them notice the blind man's hair stirring in windless air. None see the way stone dust begins to fall from ancient mortar joints. Samson places his full weight against the pillars, tests their resistance, feels them give slightly under pressure that should not move them at all. God has heard. God has answered. One last miracle for one last prayer. The temple holds its breath without knowing why. Even the loudest voices seem to quiet for a moment, as if the building itself senses that something important is about to change. Something that will alter the balance of power between gods and men, between pride and judgment, between the living and the dead. The collapse, death of the hero and the lords. The pillars crack with sounds like thunder. Stone dust rains down as mortar joints, ancient and weathered, begin to fail under impossible pressure. Samson's final prayer receives its answer in the groaning of limestone and the shriek of failing timber. For a heartbeat, the crowd thinks this is part of the show, the blind giant pressing against stone pillars as if he could move them. Children laugh, adults point and jeer. The guards step back to give him room to humiliate himself further. Then the first pillar shifts. The sound starts low, like distant thunder, then builds to a roar that drowns out 3,000 voices. Chunks of stone fall from the ceiling. People look up in confusion, then growing alarm. The temple of Dagon, standing for centuries, begins to die. Samson throws his full weight into the task, every muscle straining against stone. The power flowing through him burns like fire in his veins. This is not the wild strength of his youth, but something focused, purposeful, final. His hair whips around his face as forces beyond nature work through his mortal frame. The second pillar cracks. Panic spreads through the crowd like spilled oil catching flame. 3,000 people suddenly understand that the roof above their heads depends on the pillars the blind man is destroying. Screams replace laughter. Celebration becomes chaos. The festival of triumph turns into stampede of terror. But there is nowhere to run. The temple's design, perfect for ceremony, becomes a trap when tons of stone begin falling. People crush against locked doors and blocked exits. Mothers lose children in the press of bodies. Strong men trample the weak in desperate attempts to escape. The Philistine lords, raised on their platforms, see death approaching with crystal clarity. They who ordered Delilah's betrayal, who paid for Samson's capture, who built their celebration on his humiliation, now watch their victory collapse into ruin. Some call for their guards, others pray to Dagon. All realize too late that they have underestimated their enemy one final time. Massive beams, each hewn from ancient cedars, snap like twigs as the roof loses support. Stone blocks that took dozens of men to lift crash down with crushing finality. The temple that took generations to build dies in seconds, taking its worshippers with it. Samson feels the walls falling around him, but holds his position. His strength does not fade until the task is complete. Both pillars give way at once, and the entire central section of the roof collapses in one tremendous crash. The sound echoes across Gaza like the judgment of God made audible. Dust rises in choking clouds, turning day to twilight. The air fills with the cries of the injured and dying. Those few who escape stumble into the streets covered in blood and stone dust, their faces blank with shock. The mighty temple of Dagon has become its worshippers' tomb. The 5 lords of the Philistines die together, crushed beneath the platform that once elevated them above common people. Their gold chains and silver rings mean nothing to falling stone. Their power ends in the same instant as their breath. The men who ruled the coastal cities for decades become just more bodies in the rubble. Rescue efforts begin immediately, but the destruction is too complete. Survivors dig desperately through the debris, calling names of lost loved ones. A few answer from beneath the ruins. Most remain forever silent. The celebration of 3,000 becomes the funeral of thousands. Samson's body lies at the center of the devastation, still positioned between the broken pillars. Death came quickly when the roof collapsed. No more grinding mills, no more chains, no more blindness or mockery. His final prayer has been answered in full. The mathematical precision of his revenge becomes clear as rescuers count the dead. More Philistines died in the temple collapse than fell to his hands during 20 years of judgeship. His death accomplished what his life could not, a blow so devastating that Philistine power never fully recovers. Word spreads quickly through the region. The fallen champion of Israel has struck one last time. The temple of Dagon lies in ruins. The lords who seemed untouchable are dust. The people who felt safe mocking a chained giant have learned the final cost of pride. Some call it miracle, others name it tragedy. The truth holds both. Samson's strength returned just long enough to fulfill his darkest purpose. The man who lived as a riddle died as an answer to questions about justice, revenge, and the price of underestimating those who have nothing left to lose. The sun sets over Gaza as rescue efforts continue through the night. Torches flicker among the ruins where torches once lit celebration. The great feast of Dagon has ended. The age of Philistine dominance begins its long decline, and somewhere in the rubble, a blind man's final prayer echoes through the silence of answered justice. Myth or memory? How the story survived. The first storytellers were probably survivors. People who lived through Samson's raids, who witnessed the temple's collapse, who carried memories too large for forgetting. They told the tales around cooking fires, in merchant stalls, wherever people gathered to make sense of events that seemed beyond human scale. Each telling changed the story slightly. Details shifted like sand in wind. Numbers grew larger or smaller depending on the teller's purpose. What remained constant was the central truth. A man of impossible strength brought low by a woman's betrayal, who died destroying his enemy's sacred place. The Hebrew storytellers faced a challenge. How do you preserve the memory of a hero who was also a fool, a judge who broke his own laws, a champion who died by suicide, taking thousands of innocents with him? The answer lay in complexity. They refused to make Samson purely good or entirely evil. Oral tradition carried the tale for generations before anyone wrote it down. Professional storytellers, the keepers of tribal memory, memorized not just the events, but the exact words used to describe them. Their training focused on precision. Sacred stories demanded perfect transmission. When scribes finally recorded the tale, they made choices that still puzzle scholars. Why give so much space to Delilah's deception? Why include the riddle about the lion and honey? Why preserve Samson's final prayer word for word? Each detail survived for reasons we can only guess. The story served multiple purposes for ancient Israel. It explained Philistine weakness after centuries of dominance. It warned against mixing with foreign peoples. It showed God working even through flawed champions. It proved that strength without wisdom leads to destruction. Different communities emphasized different aspects. Warriors focused on Samson's battlefield prowess. Priests highlighted his broken vows and their consequences. Women's circles examined Delilah's motivations and choices. Each group found their own meaning in the ancient words. The tale crossed cultural boundaries early. Philistine survivors had their own version, probably casting Samson as a terrorist and Delilah as a patriotic hero. Egyptian scribes mentioned a Hebrew strongman who destroyed a temple. Even distant peoples heard echoes of the story through trade routes and diplomatic contacts. Jewish rabbis of later centuries expanded the narrative with elaborate commentary. They gave Delilah detailed backstories, created conversations between Samson and God, explained every apparent contradiction with careful logic. Their additions became part of the tradition, layers of interpretation, building on the original foundation. Christian writers saw Samson as a flawed preview of Christ. Both were announced by angels. Both fought for their people's freedom. Both died to defeat their enemies. The parallels were too obvious to ignore, though they required creative interpretation to work completely. Islamic tradition included Samson among the prophets, though his story received different emphasis. His strength came from faith, not hair. His downfall resulted from pride, not betrayal. Cultural values shaped how each religious community remembered the ancient judge. Archaeological evidence supports some details while leaving others mysterious. Philistine temples with central pillars have been uncovered. Iron weapons from the right period fill museum cases. Grinding mills matching biblical descriptions still turn up in ancient ruins. The physical world confirms the story's setting, but archaeology stays silent about individuals. No inscription mentions Samson by name. No statue depicts Delilah's face. No royal record admits to losing thousands in a temple collapse. The powerful rarely document their most embarrassing defeats. Medieval manuscripts preserved the text through copying and recopying. Monks in scriptoriums, scribes in synagogues, scholars in libraries, all played roles in keeping the story alive. Each copy risked introducing errors, but also ensured survival through redundancy. The invention of printing made the story available to common people for the first time. No longer dependent on priests or scholars for access, ordinary readers could form their own opinions about Samson and Delilah. This democratization of the text sparked new interpretations and debates. Modern scholarship applies historical criticism to separate legend from fact. Linguistic analysis reveals when different parts were written. Comparative mythology shows how the story relates to similar tales from other cultures. Archaeological dating provides historical context. Yet the story's power transcends academic analysis. It speaks to something universal about human nature, the tension between strength and weakness, the complexity of love and betrayal, the way personal flaws can destroy public heroes. These themes remain as relevant now as they were 3,000 years ago. The tale survived because it tells truth about the human condition, not historical truth necessarily, but emotional and spiritual truth. It captures how we wrestle with power, temptation, loyalty, and mortality. These struggles outlast empires and civilizations. Delilah in art, muse of betrayal. Renaissance painters discovered Delilah like prospectors finding gold. Here was a biblical story with everything their patrons desired: beauty, drama, exotic settings, and just enough flesh to satisfy without crossing into scandal. The woman who seduced Samson became their favorite subject for exploring temptation, power, and the dangerous allure of forbidden love. Artemisia Gentileschi painted her with knowing eyes and careful hands. The scissors gleam in candlelight as Delilah cuts away Samson's strength strand by strand. But Artemisia's Delilah shows conflict, not cruelty. Her face reflects the weight of necessary betrayal. Here is a woman making an impossible choice, not a simple villain reveling in destruction. Rubens preferred drama over subtlety. His Delilah appears as pure temptation, all curves and golden hair. Samson sleeps like an innocent child while she signals to hidden soldiers. The composition screams danger, but the sleeping giant notices nothing. Rubens painted desire defeating wisdom, beauty conquering strength. Dutch masters found different meanings in the tale. Rembrandt's versions focus on light and shadow, illuminating moral complexity through artistic technique. His Delilah emerges from darkness, neither purely evil nor entirely innocent. The chiaroscuro style mirrors the story's ethical ambiguity. Truth exists somewhere between light and dark. The Baroque period embraced Delilah's theatricality. Caravaggio followers painted her as an actress on history's stage, performing betrayal with dramatic gestures and flowing robes. Their canvases capture the moment of revelation when hidden truth finally steps into the light. Every brushstroke serves the narrative tension. Neoclassical artists preferred moral clarity over emotional complexity. Their Delilah represents vice corrupting virtue, foreign seduction destroying domestic strength. These paintings served as warnings about the dangers of mixing with other cultures, other values, other loyalties. Art became propaganda disguised as beauty. The Romantic movement reclaimed Delilah's humanity. Their paintings show a woman torn between love and duty, desire and survival. Romantic Delilah suffers for her choices instead of celebrating them. She becomes tragic figure rather than simple temptress, victim of circumstances larger than personal will. Photography brought new possibilities for depicting the ancient story. Victorian photographers staged elaborate scenes with models in biblical costume. Their images aimed for historical accuracy but revealed contemporary attitudes about gender, power, and morality. Even factual photography carried cultural baggage. Hollywood seized Delilah's story with both hands. Silent films made her a vamp, the dangerous woman who destroys strong men through sexual manipulation. Hedy Lamarr embodied this version in the 1949 epic, all smoky glances and revealing costumes. Cinema turned her into an archetype of feminine danger. Modern filmmakers struggle with the story's problematic elements. How do you portray Delilah without reinforcing harmful stereotypes about women? Some films make her a spy with pure motives. Others present her as genuinely loving Samson, but trapped by circumstances. All seek to complicate the simple equation of woman equals betrayal. Television found the story perfect for miniseries treatment. The format allows time to develop both characters fully, exploring the relationship beyond the moment of betrayal. Modern productions often give Delilah her own story arc, complete with backstory, motivation, and agency, beyond her role in Samson's downfall. Opera composers loved the dramatic possibilities. Saint-Saëns created Samson and Delilah with arias that capture both characters' emotional complexity. Delilah's seduction song becomes a masterpiece of musical manipulation, while Samson's final prayer reaches heights of tragic nobility. Music adds layers that words alone cannot achieve. Contemporary artists find new angles on the ancient tale. Feminist painters reimagined Delilah as a woman fighting for survival in a patriarchal world. Her betrayal becomes an act of resistance rather than simple greed. These works ask uncomfortable questions about whose story we tell and why. Sculpture presents unique challenges when depicting Delilah. How do you capture betrayal in marble? How do you show psychological complexity in bronze? The best sculptures focus on gesture and expression, finding ways to suggest inner conflict through external form. Stone becomes psychology made visible. Comic books and graphic novels embrace the story's visual drama. Artists can show Samson's impossible strength and Delilah's subtle manipulation with equal effectiveness. The medium allows for intimate character moments and epic action sequences within the same narrative. Sequential art serves the story's dual nature perfectly. Digital art opens new possibilities for depicting biblical characters. Computer graphics can show Samson's strength with unprecedented realism while capturing Delilah's emotional complexity through subtle facial animation. Technology serves ancient storytelling in ways previous generations could never imagine. Fashion designers draw inspiration from Delilah's image across cultures and centuries. Her costume represents seduction, power, and cultural otherness rolled into silk and jewelry. Fashion shows become performances of the biblical narrative, with models embodying different interpretations of the legendary temptress. Children's book illustrators face the challenge of making an adult story appropriate for young audiences. Their Delilah becomes a cautionary figure about the importance of keeping promises and choosing friends wisely. The betrayal gets softened, but moral lessons remain intact through careful artistic interpretation. Modern installation artists create immersive experiences around the Samson and Delilah story. Visitors walk through recreated spaces, experiencing the tale from multiple perspectives. These works challenge traditional notions of hero and villain by forcing audiences to literally see the story from different viewpoints. The image of Delilah continues evolving as each generation finds new meanings in her ancient story. She remains art's favorite biblical temptress, but contemporary interpretations reveal her complexity rather than reducing her to simple stereotype. The woman who brought down a giant continues inspiring artists to explore the eternal themes of love, betrayal, and the price of survival. Feminist reclamation, Delilah reconsidered. The story has been told by men for men about men for 3,000 years. Delilah appears as supporting character in Samson's drama defined entirely by her relationship to the male hero. But what happens when women take back the narrative? When they ask different questions about motivation, agency, and survival? Consider her world through female eyes. The Bronze Age offered few options for women without male protection. Delilah lived among the Philistines, possibly as a foreigner herself. Her survival depended on intelligence, beauty, and the ability to navigate dangerous political waters. Independence required careful calculation of risk and reward. The text never calls her a prostitute despite centuries of assumption. She owns her home, controls her resources, and negotiates directly with powerful men. These details suggest a woman of some standing, not a desperate victim selling her body for survival. Her agency challenges simple narratives about biblical women as passive objects. Modern feminist scholars ask, what if her betrayal was justified? Samson had spent 20 years terrorizing her people. He burned crops, destroyed property, and killed thousands in personal vendettas disguised as divine missions. From Philistine perspective, he was a terrorist, not a hero. Delilah's actions might represent patriotic duty rather than personal betrayal. The seduction itself becomes more complex under feminist analysis. Who actually controlled the relationship? Samson visited her repeatedly, always returning despite obvious danger. She asked direct questions about his weakness. He chose to answer eventually. Perhaps she was not master manipulator, but simply persistent questioner dealing with an arrogant man. Her emotional manipulation receives different interpretation through feminist lens. How can you say you love me when your heart is not with me? Sounds less like calculated deception and more like legitimate complaint. If Samson truly loved her, why withhold such crucial information? Why maintain barriers that prevented real intimacy? The money becomes more complicated too. 5,500 pieces of silver represented life-changing wealth, but also enormous risk. Betraying someone of Samson's reputation meant making powerful enemies. The payment had to be large enough to justify the danger. Her price reflected her value as an agent, not her desperation as a victim. Some feminist readings suggest Delilah genuinely loved Samson, but faced impossible choices. Save the man she loved, or save her people from his destructive rampages. The biblical text offers hints of real affection beneath the political maneuvering. Her persistence in questioning him might reflect desperate hope that he would trust her completely. The aftermath of her story reveals gendered patterns of historical memory. Samson gets complex treatment as flawed hero struggling with divine calling. Delilah gets reduced to one-dimensional temptress whose motivations matter less than her role in male destiny. This imbalance reflects who controlled the storytelling process for millennia. Contemporary women writers reclaim Delilah by giving her full humanity. Their novels explore her childhood, her relationships with family, her dreams beyond the biblical narrative. These stories ask what shaped her into someone capable of such momentous betrayal. They refuse to accept her as born villain. The #Me Too movement brings new perspective to power dynamics in the story. Samson possessed literal superhuman strength. Physical intimidation lurked beneath every interaction, whether intended or not. Delilah's deception might represent the only form of power available to women facing overwhelming masculine force. Her weapons were words and wiles, because those were her only options. Modern psychology offers additional insights into the relationship. Samson displays classic narcissistic traits: grandiosity, need for admiration, lack of empathy for others. His riddles, his boasting, his casual violence all point to personality disorder. Delilah might have been dealing with an abusive partner whose charm masked deeper dysfunction. The religious context becomes more complex through feminist analysis. Ancient Near Eastern cultures worship powerful goddesses alongside male deities. Delilah might have served spiritual as well as political purposes in opposing Samson. Her victory could represent feminine divine power defeating masculine aggression. The biblical writers committed to monotheism naturally suppressed this interpretation. Archaeological evidence reveals women's actual roles in ancient societies. Far from being powerless, they often controlled trade networks, religious ceremonies, and diplomatic negotiations. Delilah's apparent independence aligns with historical reality better than later stereotypes about female weakness and dependence. The haircutting scene receives feminist reinterpretation as well. Instead of treacherous seduction, it becomes intimate moment between lovers. Perhaps Samson fell asleep peacefully because he finally trusted someone completely. The betrayal hurts more because it violated genuine emotional connection, not just physical vulnerability. Her disappearance from the narrative takes on new meaning when viewed through feminist lens. Women's stories often end when their usefulness to male narratives concludes. But Delilah's vanishing might represent successful escape from patriarchal control. She took the money and wrote her own ending, beyond male oversight or judgment. Contemporary artists reimagine her visual representation. Instead of exotic temptress in revealing clothes, she appears as competent professional completing difficult assignment. Her beauty becomes tool rather than identity. Her intelligence drives the action instead of supernatural feminine wiles that remove agency from both characters. The story's endurance partly stems from its uncomfortable truths about relationships between men and women. Love and power intertwine in complex ways. Trust becomes vulnerability. Intimacy creates opportunity for both healing and harm. These dynamics transcend historical periods and cultural boundaries. Feminist theology asks whether Delilah might have been following divine calling too. If God used her to accomplish Samson's final mission, then her betrayal served larger purpose. This reading makes her an instrument of divine will rather than enemy of it. The moral landscape shifts when multiple characters serve the same ultimate authority. Marriage dynamics in the story reflect ancient patterns still recognizable today. Samson expected Delilah to accept his secrets while demanding complete transparency from her. He maintained emotional distance while expecting physical intimacy. These double standards appear throughout history in various forms. Modern therapeutic approaches to trauma recognize that survival sometimes requires behaviors that seem morally questionable. Delilah lived in constant danger from Samson's unpredictable violence and from Philistine demands for results. Her choices might represent adaptive responses to impossible circumstances rather than character flaws. The story's reception history reveals more about each era's gender attitudes than about the original characters. Medieval commentators emphasized female treachery. Renaissance artists focused on erotic appeal. Victorian moralists warned against foreign seduction. Each generation projected their own anxieties onto ancient text. Contemporary feminist scholars argue for reading Delilah's story alongside other biblical women who used deception for survival. Tamar, Rahab, Esther, and Judith all employed similar tactics when faced with patriarchal systems that offered few alternatives. The pattern suggests survival strategy rather than moral failing. The silver pieces themselves become symbols of female economic agency. Delilah negotiated her own price, controlled her own payment, and presumably managed her own financial future. These details matter in cultures where women rarely controlled significant resources. Her wealth represented independence and power. Her ethnic identity adds another layer to feminist interpretation. As a Philistine woman, she faced double marginalization in Hebrew storytelling tradition. Foreign and female, she represented everything the biblical writers wanted their audience to distrust. But modern readers can recognize these biases and read past them to find more complex character. The feminist reclamation of Delilah's story doesn't require making her pure hero instead of pure villain. It asks for the same complexity granted to male biblical characters. She can be sympathetic without being innocent, understandable without being admirable, human without being perfect. Samson as archetype, strong men who fall. He stands at the beginning of a long line of heroes whose greatest strength becomes their ultimate weakness. The strong man undone by love, by pride, by the very gifts that made him legendary. Samson's story echoes through literature, film, and human consciousness because it captures something essential about power and its price. Achilles follows the pattern centuries later in Homer's telling. Invincible warrior with one fatal weakness, his heel, but more truly his rage. Like Samson, he possesses strength beyond mortal limits. Like Samson, his emotions control him more than wisdom guides him. Both heroes die young, their deaths more meaningful than their lives. The Greek tragedians understood this archetype perfectly. Their heroes always carry the seeds of their own destruction. Heracles, strongest of all mortals, dies from wearing a poisoned shirt given by his wife. The gift that destroys him comes through love, trust, and domestic intimacy, the same forces that brought down Samson. Mythology across cultures repeats the theme. Celtic legends tell of Cuchulainn, whose battle fury made him unstoppable but also uncontrollable. Norse sagas speak of berserkers whose strength in battle left them vulnerable afterward. The pattern suggests something universal about human nature and the burden of exceptional gifts. Medieval romance transformed the archetype into stories of knights undone by courtly love. Lancelot's strength serves Arthur's kingdom until his forbidden passion for Guinevere destroys everything he swore to protect. The stronger the knight, the more complete his fall when love conquers duty. Shakespeare perfected the tragic hero whose greatness contains the mechanism of his downfall. Othello's military genius cannot save him from jealousy. Macbeth's courage in battle becomes ruthless ambition in politics. King Lear's royal authority blinds him to his daughter's true natures. Each mirrors Samson's pattern of strength becoming weakness. The Romantic era embraced the archetype enthusiastically. Byron's heroes possess dark magnetism that attracts love and destruction equally. Their very intensity makes them irresistible to women and inevitable victims of their own passions. The Byronic hero owes clear debt to biblical Samson. Modern superheroes follow the ancient pattern with remarkable consistency. Superman's strength comes from alien heritage that also makes him vulnerable to kryptonite. Spider-Man's powers bring responsibility that costs him normal happiness. The X-Men face persecution because of the very gifts that make them special. Power always carries price. Film noir discovered perfect material in the strong man destroyed by femme fatale. The detective, the boxer, the war veteran, all possess strength that attracts dangerous women who ultimately destroy them. These movies update Samson's story for urban audiences, trading ancient temples for dark city streets. Westerns created their own version of the archetype. The gunfighter whose reputation for violence makes him target for every young gun seeking fame. Shane, the man with no name, countless others. They all carry strength that isolates them from normal life and love. Their gifts become curses in civilized society. Action heroes of the modern era seem to escape the pattern by defeating their enemies and winning the girl. But sequels reveal the truth. John McClane's heroics destroy his marriage. James Bond's adventures prevent lasting relationships. Even successful strong men pay emotional costs for their physical victories. Sports culture produces real-life examples of the archetype. Athletes whose physical gifts elevate them to godlike status, only to fall through personal weaknesses. The stronger and more dominant they become, the further they have to fall when human frailty finally claims them. The business world creates its own versions. Corporate titans whose ruthless strength builds empires but destroys families. Tech innovators whose genius changes the world while isolating them from human connection. The pattern persists across different arenas of power and achievement. Military history offers countless examples. Generals whose tactical brilliance wins battles but whose personal flaws lose wars. Warriors whose courage in combat cannot save them from political intrigue at home. Alexander the Great conquered the known world but died young, possibly poisoned by those closest to him. The pattern reveals something uncomfortable about human nature. We admire strength but also resent it. We elevate heroes but secretly wait for their fall. The stronger someone becomes, the more satisfying their eventual destruction feels to those who cannot match their gifts. Psychological analysis suggests why the archetype endures. Strong individuals often develop in response to early trauma or loss. Their strength serves as defense against further hurt, but also prevents the vulnerability necessary for genuine intimacy. The very mechanism that creates their power ultimately destroys their happiness. Modern therapy recognizes this pattern in many clients. High achievers whose success masks deep insecurity, athletes whose physical prowess compensates for emotional wounds, leaders whose public strength hides private weakness. The therapeutic goal becomes integrating strength with vulnerability rather than choosing between them. The Samson archetype serves as warning and inspiration simultaneously. It shows the danger of relying too heavily on any single gift, no matter how impressive, but it also celebrates the willingness to use one's strength for others, even at personal cost. The hero's fall becomes meaningful when it serves larger purpose. Contemporary storytelling continues finding new ways to explore the archetype. Antiheroes whose strength comes from moral compromise, vigilantes whose justice depends on violence they claim to oppose, supervillains whose power stems from the same source as their eventual defeat. The variations are endless, but the pattern remains constant. The story resonates because everyone possesses some strength that could become weakness under the right circumstances. Intelligence becomes arrogance, compassion becomes exploitation, independence becomes isolation. We see ourselves in these fallen heroes, recognizing our own potential for self destruction. Samson's legacy lies not just in his individual story, but in the template he provided for understanding how strength and weakness intertwine in human experience. 3,000 years later, we still tell variations of his tale because we still struggle with the same fundamental questions about power, love, trust, and the price of exceptional gifts. Final reflections: the woman, the giant, the fall. In the end, they are both mysteries wrapped in ancient words and endless interpretation. Samson, the man of impossible strength who died from his greatest weakness. Delilah, the woman whose name became synonymous with betrayal, but whose true motives remain hidden in historical shadow. Their story refuses simple answers because human nature itself resists simplification. What did she think in those final moments before the scissors touched his hair? Was it triumph, relief, regret? The text offers no window into her heart at the crucial instant. Perhaps that silence is the point. Some choices remain forever private, known only to the one who makes them, and whatever gods or demons whisper in the darkness. And what of him? Did some part of Samson know what was coming? His willingness to finally reveal his secret suggests either complete trust or unconscious desire for ending. Maybe the burden of being exceptional had grown too heavy. Maybe death seemed preferable to continued isolation in his tower of strength. Their relationship challenges every simple category we try to impose. Was it love, manipulation, mutual need disguised as passion? The story provides evidence for all interpretations while confirming none completely. Real relationships rarely fit neat definitions, and theirs was real enough to reshape history. The silver pieces tell their own story about human motivation. 5,500, enough to buy freedom, security, independence. But was money really her primary motivation? Or did it simply make the betrayal possible by providing practical justification for emotional necessity? We judge others' choices by their outcomes, while making our own based on limited information and uncertain hopes. Samson's final prayer remains one of Scripture's most honest moments. No pretense about noble purpose or divine mission. Just a broken man asking for enough strength to die meaningfully. His last words carry more genuine faith than all his earlier boasting about God's favor and special calling. The temple's collapse becomes metaphor for how individual choices ripple outward beyond personal intention. Delilah sought to solve a local problem, but altered the balance of power across the entire region. Samson meant to die with dignity, but ended up changing the course of history. Neither could have predicted the full consequences of their actions. Modern readers bring our own baggage to their ancient story. We live in times when trust seems scarce and betrayal feels commonplace, when strength gets questioned and vulnerability becomes strategy, when love and manipulation intertwine so completely that distinguishing between them requires careful analysis. Their story speaks to contemporary anxieties about relationships, power, and authenticity. Yet something timeless persists beneath the cultural specifics: the basic human drama of trust given and violated, the tension between public strength and private weakness, the way intimate knowledge becomes weapon in the wrong hands. These dynamics transcend historical periods because they flow from unchanging aspects of human nature. The story's endurance across 3 millennia suggests that we need narratives like this one. Tales that explore the darker corners of love and loyalty without providing easy answers or comfortable resolutions. Stories that acknowledge how good people sometimes do terrible things for understandable reasons. Perhaps that's why both characters continue fascinating us. They are neither pure heroes nor simple villains, but recognizably human figures caught in circumstances larger than their ability to control. Their choices reveal character while also responding to forces beyond individual will. They make decisions we might make while facing consequences we hope to avoid. The woman who brought down a giant did so with scissors and patience, not sword and strength. Her victory came through understanding rather than force. She knew him well enough to find his weakness and exploit it effectively. Whether we judge her harshly or sympathetically, we cannot deny her competence. The giant fell not because his enemies overpowered him, but because he finally chose to trust completely. His downfall required his cooperation. The strongest man in history was defeated by his own need for genuine intimacy, even when it came from dangerous source. His humanity destroyed him more surely than any enemy force. Their story asks uncomfortable questions about the nature of love and loyalty. Can affection coexist with betrayal? Does understanding someone's weakness create obligation to protect them or opportunity to exploit them? When does survival justify actions that cause others harm? The text provides the situation but leaves the moral calculus to individual readers. In the silence after the temple falls, we hear echoes of every relationship that ended in betrayal, every trust that proved misplaced, every love that became weapon. Their story continues because our own stories continue. As long as humans struggle with power and vulnerability, with love and loyalty, with the gap between public strength and private weakness, we will find meaning in the tale of Samson and Delilah. The woman's name still carries weight after 3,000 years. We whisper it when warning against seductive dangers. We invoke it when describing calculated betrayal. We remember her when trust proves costly. She achieved a kind of immortality through her moment of decisive action. The giant's legacy proves equally enduring. His name represents strength undone by weakness, power compromised by passion, divine gifts wasted through human frailty. We remember him when heroes fall, when the mighty stumble, when strength alone proves insufficient for life's challenges. Together, they remind us that every relationship contains the possibility of both salvation and destruction, that knowing someone completely grants power that can heal or harm, that love and betrayal often spring from the same deep need for connection and understanding. Their ancient drama continues playing out in modern hearts, one choice at a time.